Chapter 664. Chu Xiu had experienced being besieged many times, but it was Chu Xiu's first time being besieged by so many martial Dao masters. In the past, when Chu Xiu was besieged, most of them were just a mob. As long as Chu Xiu killed the strongest few, the rest would naturally collapse. Now, none of Chu Xiu's 5 opponents were easy to deal with. Even Wang Shuangjuan, who was not very famous, had once fought and killed in the Jianghu of Eastern Qi before reaching the realm of martial arts grandmaster. Although Qi Jian did not come from the 2 Buddhist sects, his Buddhist skills were still incomparably profound. Just now, Chu Xiu's instant outburst had repelled 3 people, but with the addition of Cheng Tingshan and Luo Junyan, Chu Xiu was in danger in an instant. With the intervention of a martial Dao grandmaster, the danger on Chu Xiu's side had doubled. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. If there was only one person, Chu Xiu could easily kill him. If there were 2 people, it would take some effort, and 3 people could suppress him. However, with 5 people attacking together, Chu Xiu was the one being suppressed. Under the joint attack of the 5 people, Chu Xiu retreated step by step. However, in an instant, Chu Xiu made a hand seal, and another formation lit up on the ground. It was also a demon gathering formation, and an even more turbulent demon aura surged into Chu Xiu's body. At this moment, Chu Xiu's original face was completely covered by the boundless demon aura, and it was extremely terrifying, as if a demon had descended. However, seeing this scene, Qi Jian sneered, and everyone present shook their heads. It seemed that Chu Xiu had really been forced to the extreme. Even in the past Kunlun devil cult, no one had set up 2 demon gathering formations consecutively. This was almost no different from suicide. At this time, in the secret room inside the Guanzhong torture room, Wei Shuya, who was drinking tea, sensed the movement outside. His hand trembled, and the tea almost spilled out. He frowned deeply. Chu Xiu did not tell him what he wanted to do. If he knew that Chu Xiu would choose such a dangerous method, he would definitely stop him. With him here, he could ensure that Chu Xiu would not die. If the Guanzhong disciplinary hall was destroyed, then so be it. If his subordinates were killed, he could just take revenge in the future. In the end, this lad was still too young, and his actions were too radical. At this moment, when the people outside saw Chu Xiu explode forth with such a level of power, they did not retreat. Instead, they advanced forward and attacked even more ferociously. The more they pressed on, the faster Chu Xiu would be able to absorb the demonic qi, and the faster he would die. Being surrounded by the boundless demon qi, Chu Xiu felt that his body had been enveloped and filled with demon qi. Even every meridian was filled with powerful demon qi and evil qi. Chu Xiu's body had yet to explode and die at such a time. It was all thanks to his powerful physical body and the heaven sun gazing at air that Chu Xiu could look inside his body. He could use his power to repair any part of his body that was under great pressure. That was why he had been able to last until now. Of course, Chu Xiu was not courting death by taking such a risk. He was a person who cherished his life very much. In his previous life, Chu Xiu had died once, but it was precisely because he had died once that he knew the value of life, and he did not want to die. Although in the eyes of most people, Chu Xiu's actions were very crazy, and sometimes he was simply risking his life, only Chu Xiu himself knew that he was so crazy and risking his life because he did not want to die. It was the same this time. If Chu Xiu wanted to fight with his life on the line, with his current strength, he had the ability to set up a killing trap where both sides would suffer. At that time, at least half of the people present would die. Now Chu Xiu was doing this just because he wanted to condense the invincible demon pill. In the past, in Xiaofan Heaven, Zhang Qingzhen fought 1 against 5 martial artists, including Chu Xiu, who were ranked in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger list. Stepping into the real pellet state and condensing the true thunder pill, he was playing quite big. But this time, Chu Xiu was playing bigger than Zhang Qingzhen. What he wanted to condense was the invincible demon pill that no one in Kunlun devil cult had ever successfully condensed since Dugu Weiwei. After obtaining the method to condense the undying demon pill from Wei Shuya, Chu Xiu finally understood why Wei Shuya's elder brother, as well as Wei Shuya and the others, had not imparted the method to their disciples, instead allowing them to condense the undying demon pills. It wasn't that they were petty. Rather, the method of condensing the undying demon pill was simply too harsh. If not for the fact that this was something that came from the Kunlun demon sect, Wei Shuya would have thought that this was something that someone had fabricated to harm others. Zhang Chengzhen's thunder golden core contained the power of thunder. When he breathed, there would be thunder. He could transform the heaven and earth's aura into the power of thunder at will. Its power was terrifying. The effect of Chu Xiu's invincible demon pill was even more abnormal, even to the point of being somewhat magical. According to the ancient book, to condense the invincible demon pill, one must first condense it into a true martial core. Halfway through condensing it, one must use an extremely powerful devil chi to cleanse the true martial core and refine the true martial core like a weapon embryo. In the end, one must even pour one's own primordial spirit and blood chi into it, constantly destroying and recasting it. This cycle repeated for 49 times, only then could the true invincible demon pill be cast. When the invincible demon pill was completed, it would also have the effect of the thunder golden core. It could swallow all things and turn them into devil chi. But compared to the thunder golden core, the invincible demon pill could use devil chi to recast the body. As long as the demon pill was not destroyed, the demon master would not die. Even if one was blasted into pieces, as long as the primordial spirit imprint on the demon pill was not destroyed, there would be a chance to absorb blood chi and be reborn. Of course, reaching this step was somewhat mysterious. In the entire Kunlun devil cult, no one except Dugu Weiwei could do it. Moreover, it was precisely because of the description on the invincible demon pill that many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult, just like the current hidden devil clan, still believed that Dugu Weiwei was not dead. As long as they did not see Dugu Weiwei's corpse, they would not believe that Dugu Weiwei was dead. Even if they saw Dugu Weiwei's corpse, as long as there was no invincible demon pill, they would not believe that Dugu Weiwei was dead. Calamity was also an opportunity. With Chu Xiu's strength, condensing an ordinary true martial core was not difficult. However, if this was the case, Chu Xiu's future path would be shorter than others. If the invincible demon pill was successful, what awaited Chu Xiu was a bright path. In Chu Xiu's dantian, his own aura chi was circulating crazily, condensing into a whirlpool that constantly rotated, containing the universe inside and connecting the heaven and earth outside. A strange rhythm began to reverberate in Chu Xiu's dantian. Condensing the true martial core was not difficult for Chu Xiu. After fighting with true martial Dao grandmasters so many times, even the number of martial Dao grandmasters who died in his hands was unknown. Chu Xiu's chance of successfully condensing the true martial core was almost as high as 99%, and the remaining trace was an accident given by the heavens. Therefore, at this time, Chu Xiu was wrapped in demonic chi, fighting with others while condensing the true martial core. No one present noticed anything unusual. Only Fang Qi Shao, who cultivated the karma sword Dao, felt that something was wrong, but he did not say anything. The 5 people outside were still attacking wildly. A powerful force blasted into Chu Xiu's body through the demonic chi, but Chu Xiu did not choose to resist. Instead, he took the initiative to put the force into his body. Wrapped in the demonic chi, he mixed his mental energy and chi and blood, and forcibly smashed the half-condensed true martial core. Chu Xiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his aura became extremely low. The eyes of Qi Jian and the others suddenly lit up when they saw this. They could see that Chu Xiu's aura was weakening. If they continued to fight, it was estimated that Chu Xiu would not be able to hold on. While struggling to resist the attacks from the outside, Chu Xiu used his qi, blood, and primordial spirit to gather the surging demonic chi outside to reconstruct the true martial core. The first time he reconstructed the true martial core condensed by Chu Xiu already contained a trace of demonic chi. If it was him, he would not be able to condense such a powerful demonic chi, which could supply him to reconstruct the true martial core at all times. Moreover, if there were no attacks from the outside, it would be even more impossible for Chu Xiu to rely on his own strength to shatter the true martial core. This opportunity was once in a blue moon. Chu Xiu had risked his life to provoke so many people. If he had provoked these people with a purpose, he probably would not have been able to provoke these people. Therefore, under the attacks of the 5 people, Chu Xiu was barely able to resist. He used the power of the 5 people to shatter the true martial core, and then reconstruct it. The pain was equivalent to having his martial arts crippled again and again. Chu Xiu did not know why it took 7 by 749 times to condense the indestructible magic core. Perhaps it was because this number was more auspicious? After being continuously shattered more than 30 times, the true martial core in Chu Xiu's dantian had already turned pitch black. Boundless demonic chi lingered on top of it, and there were even traces of strange runes faintly discernible. It was not artificially engraved, but naturally formed demonic runes. After fighting to this extent, Chu Xiu still did not die. Even an idiot felt that something was wrong. Every time, they could feel that their power had already hit Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu's aura was also extremely declining. Even through the demonic chi, they could clearly see that Chu Xiu was vomiting blood from their attacks. In the end, no matter how they attacked, Chu Xiu did not die. Even his aura was maintained at that low level, but he was still tenaciously resisting. Cheng Tingshan shouted in a low voice, "Wait! Something's wrong." The few people present all frowned. They knew that something was wrong, but what was wrong? When Chu Xiu saw that these people had slowed down their attacks, he immediately frowned. Inside his dantian, Chu Xiu's indestructible magic core was trembling violently. The magic core had not completely formed and was extremely unstable. If he could not continuously break it and recast it, then the magic core would explode and he would be the one to die. Therefore, in the next moment, Chu Xiu took the initiative to attack. The heavenly demon dance carried a boundless mournful demonic chi as it slashed towards Cheng Tingshan. Cheng Tingshan snorted coldly. A light cyan sword was unsheathed, bringing with it a violent astral wind that tore apart the demonic chi. However, Chu Xiu did not dodge, and directly fought with his life on the line. His own demonic chi was torn apart by Cheng Tingshan's sword, and the sword chi entered his body, while Cheng Tingshan was also sent flying by Chu Xiu's blade, and blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 665. Chu Xiu's desperate attack stunned everyone present. Cheng Tingshan did not even have time to react before he was severely injured. Was this guy crazy? Did he want to drag a few people down with him even before he died? However, before they could come back to their senses, Chu Xiu attacked in an even more frenzied manner. The demonic aura around him was condensed to the extreme. It was as if it had a physical form as it attached itself to Chu Xiu's body. Cheng Tingshan covered the huge bloody wound on his chest, his eyes flashing with fear. Chu Xiu's strength was completely comparable to a martial Dao master. With the same attack, he could have severely injured Chu Xiu, but in the end, Chu Xiu was completely fine, while he took the attack head-on. Seeing that Chu Xiu was charging at him again, Cheng Tingshan waved his hand, and 9 longswords appeared around him. Each longsword was a god-level existence. The Hidden Sword Villa had a small number of famous swords that were ranked in the world's famous sword manuals. However, the Hidden Sword Villa would not use these famous swords. Instead, they were worshipped in the sect. This was also the reason why many martial arts sects secretly scolded the Hidden Sword Villa for wasting God's resources. So many famous swords were left in the Hidden Sword Villa to gather dust. It was a waste. This time, Cheng Tingshan was absolutely serious about this expedition to the Guanzhong torture room. He had brought more than 10 god-level longswords with him at once. The 9 god-level longswords turned into a sword formation, enveloping Chu Xiu within it. The power of the sharpness was extremely dazzling, extremely resplendent. After all, Cheng Tingshan was the master of the hidden sword villa and a famous figure on the honor list. It was impossible that he did not have any trump cards. Previously in the Eastern Qi Alliance, if he had used all his strength right from the start, he would not have been so humiliated and defeated by Shenbai in one move. The sword aura blasted into Chu Xiu's body, but Chu Xiu did not defend at all. Instead, he guided the sword aura into his body to help him destroy the eternal demon core in his body. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered that the more times the eternal demon core was destroyed, the stronger it became. Cheng Tingshan needed more than 10 strikes to destroy Chu Xiu's eternal demon core. Outside, Chu Xiu's demonic aura surged around him. A demonic shadow even appeared behind him, overlapping with his figure. That was the power of the 9 heavens' demonic golden body. Although this technique was used to train one's body, it was still a top-notch demonic technique after all, and could also affect the demonic aura. Chu Xiu chose to use the most violent method, sending several swords flying. He used his physical body to take on the sword qis, and the majestic demonic qi hand slammed down, forcing Cheng Tingshan to retreat step by step. What are you all waiting for? Waiting to be defeated by Chu Xiu one by one? Cheng Tingshan roared at the crowd. Qi Jian and the others furrowed their brows, but they still acted instinctively. In fact, they did not want to attack, because the current situation was a bit strange. There was no one in this world who could not be killed, but at this moment, Chu Xiu seemed to have really fallen into a state of immortality, directly exchanging his life for another's. No matter how they attacked, it was useless. Qi Jian and the others were all experienced and knowledgeable, so there would not be such an unreasonable thing in this world. Therefore, calming down and thinking carefully was the right thing to do. But now, it seemed that Chu Xiu did not give them a chance to think. If they delayed any longer, Cheng Tingshan would really be killed. However, at the moment when the crowd once again attacked Chu Xiu, ready to rescue Cheng Tingshan, Chu Xiu suddenly turned around and made a seal with his hand. Boundless demonic aura integrated with the power of his spirit, and the soul-destroying arrow whistled silently towards Luo Jianyan. At the same time, the heaven's sun gazing at air technique locked on to him. Almost in an instant, it exploded in Luo Jianyan's head, causing him to let out a muffled groan, and blood flowed from his 7 orifices. Turning around, Chu Xiu almost instantly came to Luo Jianyan's side. Ignoring Shenbai and Wang Shuangjuan's sword, he directly grabbed Luo Jianyan's neck. The demonic aura gathered to the extreme, and instantly exploded. Bang! A soft sound rang out, and before Luo Jianyan could react, Chu Xiu had already squeezed Luo Jianyan's head. Everyone present was stunned, and a look of disbelief flashed in their eyes. Chu Xiu had killed more than 1 or 2 martial Dao Grand Masters, and Luo Jianyan was a martial Dao Grand Master who was not very strong. Originally, it would not have been surprising if Chu Xiu had killed him. But now, Chu Xiu had killed Luo Jianyan despite being surrounded by 4 people. This was a little shocking. Even Cheng Tingshan himself did not realize that Chu Xiu had actually done this. However, while they were stunned, Chu Xiu was not. The hungry ghost incarnation was released by Chu Xiu, and at the same time, Chu Xiu performed the demonic blood technique to the extreme, triggering the boiling qi and blood in Cheng Tingshan's body. As a martial Dao Grand Master, Cheng Tingshan's resistance to martial arts like the demonic blood technique was very strong. However, he had been slashed by Chu Xiu earlier, and his qi and blood were exposed, so he could not even fully control his qi and blood at this time. Moreover, the hungry ghost incarnation was constantly devouring his strength. The demonic dance slashed down continuously, and the powerful demonic qi along with the saber gleam forced Cheng Tingshan to retreat step by step. Finally, with a loud bang, a crack appeared on the long sword in his hand. Cheng Tingshan gritted his teeth, turned around, and fled. This scene was even more shocking than when Chu Xiu had killed Luo Jianyan in a 1 versus 5 battle. After all, Cheng Tingshan was the Villa master of Hidden Sword Villa, a famous figure in the pugilistic world. Yet, he chose to flee at this time. Did he have no shame? In fact, to Cheng Tingshan, face was important, but his life was more important. Only God knew what kind of grudge Chu Xiu had with him that he chose to attack him alone. Cheng Tingshan had no doubt that if the fight continued, he would follow in Luo Jianyan's footsteps. He came to kill Chu Xiu, not for revenge, but for benefits and reputation. However, when the way to obtain this benefit and reputation was too dangerous, Cheng Tingshan would also choose to give up. However, his escape had caused trouble for Qi Jian and the other two. Previously, the three of them had attacked Chu Xiu, and when they were no match for him, they called Cheng Tingshan and Luo Jianyan over. Now, one was dead, and the other had fled. The three of them were now being suppressed by Chu Xiu. Qi Jian was continuously bombarded by Chu Xiu's great compassion poem martial arts, and the smiling Maitreya had already turned into the color of a pig's liver, which was caused by the surging of his qi and blood. Seeing that the fight had reached this point, Qi Jian finally could not hold on any longer, and also turned to flee. However, the one who fled faster than him was Wang Shuangjuan. This person was a rogue cultivator, and he had been in the pugilistic world for a long time. When he saw that the situation was not right, he also had the thought of fleeing. He was the crown prince's man, but it did not mean that he would sell his life to the crown prince. Therefore, when he saw that there was no one to stop him, Chu Xiu pointed out the divine finger of heaven and earth annihilation. The light that was filled with the intent of death and quietude covered the Buddhist light, and immediately left a hole in Qi Jian's chest, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and flee in a sorry state. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You missed." If the finger just now had hit Qi Jian's chest, his heart would have completely lost its vitality. Of the 5 people who had besieged Chu Xiu, 1 had died, 1 had fled, and 2 were seriously injured. Only Shunbai was left. Looking at Chu Xiu, a hint of unwillingness appeared on Shunbai's face. He had a feud with Chu Xiu, a death feud. In the past, when he had been crippled by Chu Xiu, the feeling of helplessness and hatred he felt was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people. No one knew what he had been like all these years, when he had secluded himself in a secret room in the back of the mountain, facing a pile of white bones and comprehending the way of the sword. Deathly stillness, loneliness, and all sorts of negative emotions nearly drove Shunbai insane. Therefore, once he came out of seclusion, Shunbai was really prepared to immediately find Chu Xiu and risk his life. But in the end, perhaps it was Lu Zongyuan's death that made Shunbai understand how heavy the responsibility on his body was. If it was according to Shunbai's original personality, even if everyone had fled and Shunbai was the only one left, he would still fight to the end with Chu Xiu. He wouldn't retreat even if he knew he would definitely die. The current Shunbai still wasn't afraid of death, but he still had the entire Azure Billow sword sect to support him, and he couldn't die. Therefore, in this instant, Shunbai's entire body was surrounded by sword qi. His entire body was like a divine weapon's sharp blade, slashing apart the air in front of him with a sharp qi and escaping into the distance. But seeing that Shunbai had actually escaped, Chu Xiu's expression suddenly changed. He immediately chased after Shunbai and laughed loudly, "You are leaving just like that? Didn't you want to take my head? Then come at me, why are you still escaping now?" Everyone else looked at Chu Xiu with a strange expression. At this moment, Chu Xiu was almost certain to win, yet he still went to provoke Shunbai. Wasn't he afraid that Shunbai would fight to the death? In fact, right now, Chu Xiu couldn't wait for Shunbai to fight to the death with him. Because he just awkwardly realized that it seemed like his attack was a bit too fierce, causing Wang Shuangjuan and Qi Jian to escape, and the external force that he received was much smaller. The undying demon core was getting more and more sturdy, and this little bit of strength was basically unable to recast the undying demon core. Even with Chu Xiu's current strength, he couldn't actively extinguish the undying demon core within his body. Furthermore, he needed to recast it, and he was only one more time away. With only one step, Chu Xiu would be able to step into the realm of a true martial Dao Grandmaster, but it was this one step, and this group of people actually didn't help him. Seeing Shenbai escape, Chu Xiu continuously attacked, and even heavily injured Shenbai, but Shenbai still didn't turn around to attack. This made Chu Xiu wonder if the Shenbai in front of him was the same Shenbai who fought with him before. His personality had changed a bit too much. However, even if Shenbai didn't attack, the undying demon core within Chu Xiu's body began to boil again. As long as he couldn't suppress this unformed undying demon core, he would be the next unlucky one. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. At worst, he could kill all these people now, and then let Chu Wuji and Mr. Lu attack him to help him complete this last step. There should be enough time. However, at this moment, not far from Guangzhou City, there was a martial artist in battle armor floating in the air with powerful inner force, staring at the battle. Seeing Shenbai's figure, he couldn't help but touch his chin and said, "Sect origin swords? Is he that person's inheritor? Interesting, that person actually still has an inheritance." This martial artist in battle armor was Divine Lord Luo of Elysium. Chapter 666. Only disciples who were nurtured by the Divine Gate from a young age could guarantee absolute loyalty to the Divine Gate. No matter how talented the others were, the Divine Gate would not want them. However, before everyone could react, demonic aura circulated in Chu Xiu's dantian. Waves of demonic aura circled like a whirlpool and finally gathered into a strange real elixir with demonic patterns on it, emitting an extremely powerful force. Initially, Divine Lord Luo was just passing by the Guangzhou torture room. Seeing that there were people fighting there, Divine Lord Luo looked around out of curiosity. He did not expect to see something good when he looked around. Martial Dao Master. Chu Xiu had actually stepped into the Martial Dao Master realm at such a time. When they heard Qi Yuanli say the two words, Divine Gate, they gasped and looked at Sir God Luo in astonishment, just like Qi Yuanli. Generally speaking, the safest way to deal with such enemies was to kill them while they were still young. Shenbai clenched his teeth and ran toward Divine Lord Luo when he saw that. The moment Chu Xiu made his move, Wei Shuya could not stop him at all. Divine Lord Luo's eyes were filled with anger. Although it was Qi Yuanli's first time meeting Divine Lord Luo, it was not a problem for Wind Sweeping Tower to collect information on all the martial artists in the Divine Gate. Chu Xiu frowned while Shenbai's face was extremely pale. The hand that was holding the sword was trembling slightly. After saying that, Divine Lord Luo did not wait for Chu Xiu's reply. He pointed at Shenbai casually and said, "I want this person. I'm very interested in some things on him. You're courting death. Senior Wei, leave with Mr. Lu and the rest immediately. Don't fight." Immortal Lord Luo gently flicked his finger and a terrifying wave of fluctuation came from the void. It was shapeless and intangible, but everywhere it passed, the void collapsed and vitality was extinguished. The shapeless and intangible power was even more frightening than a tangible power. Chu Xiu frowned. Although he still had the upper hand, and it seemed like he could casually kill Shenbai on the spot, he wished for nothing more than for Shenbai to turn around and fight him to the death, so as to help him condense the indestructible demon core. It wasn't a sound, but everyone had a strange feeling. It was as if something had fallen and made a soft sound. Everyone present knew what was going on with the attack on the Guangzhou torture room. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm intervening, but who was this person? Dangerous, extremely dangerous, but if he succeeded, Chu Xiu would also be able to obtain more opportunities and benefits. If that was the case, it would be a good thing for everyone present. At least they wouldn't have to do anything. Just then, an extreme pressure descended from the sky. Divine Lord Luo, who was wearing armor, walked in the air. Every step he took caused a ripple in the void. It was as though he could shatter the void with his next step. The appearance of an Elysium member in the pugilistic world was definitely a major event. If Shunbai didn't die this time, with his leadership, Azure Billow Sword sect would at least be stronger than it was now, let alone prospering in the future. The wind-sweeping pavilion's information was comprehensive. As the vice pavilion master, Qi Yuanli had read tens of thousands of books. Naturally, he knew about the eternal demon pill. But the reality was cruel. Divine Lord Luo wasn't here to save him. His tone was to treat him as an object, a commodity that could be taken at will. Cheng Tingshan would be seriously injured after taking a blow from Chu Xiu, but he was still able to withstand it. As for the other half of the power, Chu Xiu couldn't stop it. Even if he used the heaven's sun gazing at air, he couldn't see the details and route of the power. As long as Azure Billow Sword sect was still here, he couldn't die. But right now, this kid wasn't even comparable to an ant, and he dared to ignore him. Where did he get his confidence from? Now that the sect origin swords had reappeared in the pugilistic world, if Divine Lord Luo was able to find the place where the expert perished, then the rewards from this trip would be beyond his imagination. At this moment, he finally realized that Chu Xiu's seemingly suicidal move actually had such a scheme in it. Shenbai was very talented, otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed Lu Zongyuan to place the future of Azure Billow Sword sect on him. As for why the other party wanted him from Chu Xiu, Shenbai had a vague guess. The other party was here for the sect origin swords. This time, Chu Xiu wasn't bluffing anymore. He used the powerful demonic qi that was condensed from his double demon gathering array to forcefully execute the red dust ethereal slash. Although it was only the form and didn't achieve the intent, it was enough. After Dugu Weiwei, the Kunlun devil cult was annihilated. In the entire hidden devil lineage, no one had the courage to try the eternal demon elixir, which was no different from courting death. Chu Xiu let out an angry roar, and the demonic qi that almost covered his body was all integrated into the saber. He ignored Divine Lord Luo's power and went straight for Shenbai. In addition to talent, the Elysium's recruitment of disciples also depended on age. After Shenbai learned the sect origin swords, he was able to fight martial Dao masters with the unity of heaven and man. He was already on par with the top 10 on the Longhu leaderboard. With the strength that Shenbai displayed now, he was definitely qualified to enter the top 10 on the Longhu leaderboard, or even the top 5. Divine Lord Luo at this level was no longer someone that a human could deal with. Seeing that Chu Xiu did not say anything, Divine Lord Luo frowned and said coldly, "I told you to stop. Step back." The power of Divine Lord Luo's finger was slashed in half, and Shenbai's entire body was also slashed in half. At that moment, his corpse that had been slashed in half still revealed a strong look of disbelief and indignation. However, at that moment, although Chu Xiu was not in a killing frenzy, he was indeed tempted to attack due to the demonic qi. Wei Shuya was also nervous. He was afraid that Chu Xiu would be in a killing frenzy and would not even take True Fire, a powerhouse in the refinement of God state, seriously. Shenbai was not a person who liked to fantasize. However, when Divine Lord Luo appeared, Shenbai really thought that the powerhouse who had suddenly appeared was there to save him. Moreover, the cause of the battle in the Guanzhong torture room was Guan Siyu's death and the exposure of Chu Xiu's identity. The eternal demon elixir was not very famous in the underworld. This was because, apart from Dugu Weiwei, no one else had successfully condensed it. In the past, the powerhouse who possessed the sect origin swords was somewhat related to the Divine Gate. However, ever since his death, there had been no news of him in the underworld. After sending Wei Shuya a telepathic message, Chu Xiu did not wait for Wei Shuya to react before he slashed out with the demonic dance in his hand towards Shenbai. By then, Chu Xiu would be facing a great enemy. A great enemy who possessed the sect origin swords and had unlimited potential. Qi Yuanli from wind-sweeping building looked at Divine Lord Luo in shock and said softly, "Divine Gate, Divine Lord Luo." This slash had a natural charm. Just the starting gesture alone seemed to cut through space, causing everything in front of Chu Xiu to be out of place in this world. He knew that Divine Lord Luo was not kind to him, but at least for now, Divine Lord Luo would not kill him. On the other hand, Chu Xiu wanted to kill him. There was a soft sound and a bloody hole appeared in Chu Xiu's dantian. However, strangely, there was no blood flowing out. Divine Lord Luo's tone was very indifferent. It was as though Shunbai was a commodity and Chu Xiu was his slave. As long as he spoke, Chu Xiu would have to stop and send Shunbai to him. Ethereal red dust slash. Everything returned to normal. Shunbai's body fell to the ground. The power of Divine Lord Luo's finger had been slashed into half. One of the halves hit the ground next to Chu Xiu. Suddenly, the ground cracked as though an earth dragon was turning over. The huge crack extended for several meters before stopping. Qi Yuanli mumbled, "Eternal Demon Elixir. It's the Eternal Demon Elixir. I see." All of this was done by Chu Xiu on purpose. Everyone present was from a major sect, so they naturally had a lot of knowledge. Guan Xiu, who was on the excellence list, had been killed by Divine Lord Luo with one move. What was he doing in the Guanzhong torture room now? Could it be that he was here to kill Chu Xiu? The power of a Heavenly Gates martial art practitioner was too strong. Even if the other party had no evil intentions, it would still cause a storm in the underworld. Everyone present was very familiar with this power, because many of them had reached this realm. In reality, Shunbai's guess was right. Divine Lord Luo was indeed here for the sect origin swords. Divine Lord Luo looked at Chu Xiu with interest and said, "Not only did you plot against the Guanzhong torture room, but you also provoked the siege of so many major sects in the underworld. You're quite bold." Interesting, very interesting. Although the sect origin swords did not state that the sect origin swords had an effect on defense, Shunbai felt that his defense was stronger than before for some reason. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something and a bold idea grew in his mind. Normally, it was possible for Heavenly Gates to take in such a talented person as a disciple. However, Heavenly Gates would not do so because Shunbai was too old. Back in the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu had dared to stand against him. After all, although Guan Xiu was also an ant, she was a rather strong ant. As the saber slashed down, it seemed as though it had split time and space apart. Everything before Chu Xiu's eyes was like a painting that had been slashed into two. Shunbai wanted to run for his life, but Chu Xiu chased after him relentlessly. He looked like he was determined to kill Shunbai. Even though Shunbai had used all his strength to run for his life, he was still unable to shake off Chu Xiu. He had even been slashed by Chu Xiu a few times and spat out blood. Everyone present was stunned. Dead. Shunbai was dead. Even Chu Xiu was dead. At that moment, Wei Shiya's voice was heard next to Chu Xiu's ears. "Chu Xiu, don't be rash. The power of Heavenly Gates is unfathomable. If I weren't injured, I would still dare to fight with Divine Lord Luo. However, if Divine Lord Luo intends to kill you, I won't be able to stop him." However, when Chu Xiu recalled the scene where Divine Lord Luo had attacked Guan Xiu, he felt a chill in his heart. Chu Xiu's movement suddenly stopped. The people who were fighting below also stopped fighting and looked at Divine Lord Luo in shock. Bang! Chapter 667. In the past, Zhang Qingzhen fought against 5 people alone and condensed the golden elixir of thunder, which was already shocking enough. Now, Chu Xiu was also fighting against 5 people alone, but 4 of them were martial Dao Grand Masters, which was even more shocking. Most importantly, Chu Xiu actually stepped into the martial Dao real pellet state by resisting the blow of Divine Lord Luo, a divine refinement state powerhouse of Tianmen true fire. This was even more shocking. At this time, Chu Xiu's state was even more bizarre. Although his dantian had condensed into the invincible demonic elixir, there was still a big hole. At this time, under the repair of the demonic energy, the big hole began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was simply miraculous. However, Divine Lord Luo was extremely furious. In his eyes, Guanxiu was an ant, a strong ant. Chu Xiu was also an ant, a very weak ant. But now, this ant actually dared to resist him and use him. This was simply unforgivable. Just as Divine Lord Luo was about to use more strength to completely obliterate the ant Chu Xiu suddenly laughed. Hee hee. The voice seemed to be made by Chu Xiu, but it also didn't seem to be made by Chu Xiu. Even Chu Xiu himself was in a state of chaos. Since the condensation of the invincible demonic elixir, Chu Xiu's mind was in chaos. He seemed to have come to a place where there was blurry chaos all around. Although it seemed boundless, this place gave Chu Xiu the feeling that it was not big and was just a prison. Moreover, Chu Xiu also had a feeling that someone was watching him. Someone in the boundless chaos was looking at him with an indescribable and strange gaze. This feeling was extremely creepy, and Chu Xiu also heard the hee-hee sound. Although he couldn't see his own body, he could feel the existence and movement of his body. The hee-hee sound was indeed made by him, but the tone was completely different from his usual tone. In the voice, there was also a strange artistic conception. If Divine Lord Luo saw everyone else as ants, then the feeling of this voice was, everyone here is trash, including you, Divine Lord Luo. You are even worse than an ant. Although Chu Xiu was a little arrogant at times, no matter how arrogant he would not dare to speak to Divine Lord Luo, who was an expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, in such a tone. In fact, Chu Xiu had already planned it beforehand. After he used Divine Lord Luo to break through the martial Dao, 49 recasts were completed, and the invincible demonic elixir was condensed. At the moment of condensing, an extreme power would erupt. It was only for a short moment, but it was enough for Chu Xiu to escape. He had won against the righteous path, so escaping was nothing. As Chu Xiu's divine elixir was had won. There was a limit to the amount of time an Elysium martial artist could spend outside. As long as he could escape, Divine Lord Luo would not have the time to hunt him down. As for whether Divine Lord Luo would look for him the next time he left the Divine Gate, Chu Xiu wasn't worried at all. Maybe by then, it would be Chu Xiu's turn to look at Divine Lord Luo like an ant. There was no problem with the plan. However, who would have thought that after the eternal demon core was truly condensed, Chu Xiu would indeed feel that powerful energy. As a result, his mind would sink into chaos, and he would be unable to control his physical body at all. As a result, that energy would only help him mend his injuries, and would not be able to unleash its full potential. When Divine Lord Luo heard the voice, he wasn't angry at first, but confused. He wondered why an ant-like figure dared to speak to him in such a tone. At that moment, Chu Xiu gently lifted the heavenly demon dance in his hand and got into a stance of the red dust slash. It was very similar to Chu Xiu's slash. To be more precise, it should be Chu Xiu's previous slash that was similar to this slash. It was just a light stance, and there was no overflow of power. However, in Divine Lord Luo's eyes, there seemed to be another shadow staring at him from within Chu Xiu's body. It was as if that shadow was about to appear in front of him as the slash fell. Divine Lord Luo suddenly thought of something. His eyes revealed a hint of fear. No one noticed the fear in his eyes. No one would even believe that Divine Lord Luo, who had killed Guanxiu in seconds the moment he appeared and had an innate aura that looked down on all living things, would actually be afraid. But in fact, he was indeed afraid. He was so afraid that his body moved and his speed exploded to the extreme. His figure almost disappeared in an instant. Even after he left, there was a sonic boom in the air. Chu Xiu's spiritual energy left the chaotic space and completely regained control of his body. However, he still held onto the saber and looked at his hands with a hint of confusion in his eyes. The excitement brought by breaking through to the real pellet state and condensing the immortal demon pill was filled with confusion. He couldn't figure out what was going on before. Chu Xiu had read a lot of ancient books about breaking through to the real pellet state, including the Guanzhong torture room and the Yinma lineage. However, none of the ancient books said that breaking through to the real pellet state would make him look like this. This was very strange. Chu Xiu dared to guarantee that there was definitely something wrong with his body. This was not the first time. When he found that the memory of his previous life was constantly blurring, he felt that something was wrong. This time, it was clearer. He even suspected that there was something else in his body. Chu Xiu was confused here, but he could no longer fight on. Divine Lord Luo made a high-profile appearance, but the result was inexplicably running away. He was just like a psychopath. What was he doing? Was it to help Chu Xiu condense the immortal demon pill? They didn't know what was going on, but they were indeed defeated in this battle. Luo Jianyan and Shenbai died, Cheng Tingshan was seriously injured, and only Wang Shuangjuan, who participated in the siege of Chu Xiu, was more sensible and fled first. Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly at the Mo family's old ancestor. Mo Qingming, old ancestor, what did I say? Brother Chu will win. Now our Mo family doesn't even have the chance to send charcoal in the snow. It's too late to even add flowers to brocade. Mo Qingming frowned. This battle was simply inexplicable. Who would have thought that at this point, Chu Xiu could still turn the tables? On the side, Fang Qishao also winked at Bai Qian and said, "What did I say? My intuition is very accurate. Chief, do you believe me now?" Bai Qian's face was a little gloomy. After all, Chu Xiu had a grudge with their Sword King City. Chu Xiu's victory was not a good thing for Sword King City. Moreover, Fang Qishao was the heir of their Sword King City. Bai Qian really didn't want Fang Qishao to be too close to Chu Xiu. At present, the relationship between the righteous and demonic sects had not reached a fierce level, unlike 500 years ago when the two sects were almost at each other's throats. But now was now, and the future was the future. As the strength of the demonic sects became stronger and stronger, no one could say what the relationship between the righteous and demonic sects would become. Ying Bailu was also looking at Chu Xiu at this time, but he didn't have any emotions such as jealousy or envy. For them, who were ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu list, breaking through to the real pellet state was really not difficult. The only difference was how to break through. Zhang Qingzhen condensed the Thunder Golden Elixir, and now Chu Xiu's scene was even bigger. He actually condensed the immortal demon pill with the help of a real fire spirit refinement state powerhouse. Who would be the next to break through to the real pellet state? Would it be Zhong Xian or Fang Qishao, or would it be Ying Bailu? In fact, Ying Bailu's competitive spirit had never been too strong, but he was surpassed by Zhang Qingzhen and Chu Xiu one after another. If he fell behind again, it would be a bit shameful. At this time, just as everyone was thinking about how to leave, Qi Yuanli's face suddenly changed. He reached out and took out a disc array with countless runes flashing on it. This was a special communication disc array of the Fengmenla. It could quickly transmit messages from thousands of miles away, but it consumed a lot of energy, and it was difficult to refine. Only Qi Yuanli and some other high-level members of the Fengmenla had it, and it would not be used if there was no extremely urgent message. Qi Yuanli's mental power probed into it. After reading the message, Qi Yuanli's expression became more solemn. He turned to the people present and said, "Everyone, I think you should leave. Something big has happened. An hour ago, the moon-worshipping sect's master Yi Shaonan came out from his retreat, and he mastered the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra. He went to the celestial master mansion of Mount Longhu alone and broke the 9 heaven divine sky thunder array of the celestial master mansion. He forced the old celestial master to make a move. After 10 moves, he won by 1.5. The old celestial master personally ordered that the celestial master mansion was closed for a year. Then Yi Shaonan turned to the southern wilderness and challenged the abbot of Subhuti Monastery, divine monk Rama. He shattered the 7 treasures Bodhi tree of Subhuti Monastery and forced Rama to set up a prison. Within a year, the martial artists of Subhuti Monastery are not allowed to step out of the southern wilderness. The faces of everyone present changed several times. This was indeed a big deal, a big deal. Since the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the righteous martial arts world had been suppressing the demonic sects, and it was the kind of absolute suppression. If it wasn't for the fact that the righteous martial arts world was afraid that the demonic sects would do something desperate, and that the bright demons and the hidden demons did indeed have a few trump cards, and that the righteous sects were not united, it would not be too difficult to completely destroy the demonic sects when the demonic sects were at their weakest. But with Yi Shaonan's 2 moves, the balance between the righteous and demonic sects was probably going to be broken. At present, the Celestial Master Mansion was the well-deserved leader of the 3 sects of Taoism, and the old Celestial Master was ranked 5th on the sovereign list, second only to the Lord of Tianmen, Jun Wushan. But in the end, he lost to Yi Shaonan by 1.5 moves. Rama was the divine monk of Subhuti Monastery. It was said that he was born with auspicious clouds and Buddha's light, and was personally adopted by the abbot of Subhuti Monastery. At the age of 3, he could recite scriptures. At the age of 7, he discussed Buddhism with the eminent monks of the monastery. At the age of 13, he traveled the southern wilderness, relieving the sufferings of life. He was even worshipped by some of the natives of the southern wilderness and became an existence that gave birth to Buddha. After experiencing thousands of tribulations, he took over the position of abbot of Subhuti Monastery at the age of 30 and was previously ranked 6th on the sovereign list. In the end, both of them were defeated by Yi Shaonan and were forced to seal the mountain for a year. It was enough to show that Yi Shaonan's demonic flames were monstrous. This Jianghu was probably going to change. Chapter 668. Half a day ago, in the moon-worshipping cult of Miaojiang. As the largest sect of the bright demon lineage, and even the first sect of the entire demonic path, moon-worshipping cult always appeared in a negative image in the legends of Jianghu. Speaking of the moon-worshipping cult, it was definitely a gloomy and terrifying place. There were human skeletons and decorations everywhere, and all the disciples of the moon-worshipping cult were ugly. They were either covered in disgusting goo worms, or they were wearing black robes and hiding in a corner, cursing you with evil secret techniques. But in fact, moon-worshipping cult was located in a huge valley. The scenery was beautiful and pleasant, and the scenery was intoxicating. It was like a paradise. Most of the disciples of moon-worshipping cult were handsome men, and the women were beautiful. This was not because moon-worshipping cult liked to accept handsome men and beautiful women as disciples, but because moon-worshipping cult had a kind of poisonous insect called face goo. After being raised in the body, it only needed to consume a little blood energy to survive, and face goo could slightly change a person's appearance. Although for most warriors, they relied on their face to make a living, no one wanted to be ugly if they could be beautiful. Therefore, 90% of the disciples of moon-worshipping cult would raise a harmless face goo. As for some ugly ones, they were either really ugly, so ugly that they couldn't bear to look at the face goo after it slightly changed their appearance, or they disdained using it and wanted to preserve their original appearance. At this time, in the deepest part of moon-worshipping cult, there was a large lake. The lake was clear and transparent, like a mirror, but in the center, there seemed to be a bottomless pit. It was so deep that one could not see the bottom, and it made people fearful. This lake was called the Divine Lake. It was said to be the origin of moon-worshipping cult. In the lake, there was a demon worshipping the moon and becoming a god. It enlightened the ancestors of moon-worshipping cult, and from then on, moon-worshipping cult came into being. The divine lake was the holy land of moon-worshipping cult, but at this time, on the edge of the divine lake, a woman put her feet into the lake and gently swayed. The woman wore a silver-colored dress unique to Miaojiang, and a pleated skirt with gorgeous Miao embroidery. The skirt was lifted up, revealing her slender jade-like legs and graceful figure. The most surprising thing was her appearance. It was a beauty that could not be described with words. Every inch of it seemed to have been carved by the heavens, perfect and flawless. At this moment, the woman was kicking the water while murmuring a Miaojiang folk song. At first glance, she looked like a spirit of the mountains. At this time, a man wearing a black robe with golden embroidery and a golden jade dragon crown walked behind the woman. He frowned and said, "Saintess, you're wearing the clothes of the Miao barbarians again. Also, you're profaning the lake of divinity. If the other disciples see this, what will become of them?" This woman dressed in Miao clothes was actually the holy maiden of moon-worshipping sect. When she was in the outside world, she usually wore white clothes with a veil covering her face. Only in moon-worshipping sect, or more accurately, in front of the high-level powerhouses of moon-worshipping sect, would she take off her veil. Hearing this, the holy maiden didn't restrain herself. She just giggled and said, "Eastern monarch Tai, you're wrong. I'm not desecrating the divinity lake. I'm taking the initiative to merge with the divinity lake and feel its power. Also, does Eastern monarch Tai care what I wear? My mother is a Miao woman, so I'm also half a barbarian. What's wrong with wearing Miao clothes?" Before Eastern monarch Tai could say anything, another old and gloomy voice was heard. "What? Does Eastern monarch Tai look down on us Miao barbarians? Moon-worshipping sect is located in Miao territory, and there are many Miao disciples in our sect. If you don't like it, then go and tell the sect leader not to accept Miao people as disciples in the future." On the other side, an old man in a gray robe walked over slowly. This old man had a stooped body, and his gray robe was covered in all kinds of strange runes. His face was also covered in strange patterns, and he held a bone cane in his hand. At first glance, he looked somewhat evil and frightening. This old man was the high priest of moon-worshipping sect. In the entire moon-worshipping sect, he was one of the top 3 powerhouses. He was a Miao, and when he heard Eastern monarch Tai's words, he naturally had to stand up and mock him. Eastern monarch Tai frowned. "If you join moon-worshipping sect, then you naturally won't be considered a Miao barbarian. Now that moon-worshipping sect is the #1 sect of the demonic path, we still have to follow the rules. It's not right to bring those barbarian habits into moon-worshipping sect." Just as the high priest was about to say something else, a violent fluctuation came from the end of the divine lake. In an instant, the high priest and Eastern monarch Tai could no longer be bothered to argue, and they both turned their heads in that direction. Even the holy maiden of moon-worshipping sect took her legs out of the divine lake and stood up, staring in that direction. The fluctuation grew stronger and stronger, and the power seemed to shoot straight into the sky. However, it began to shrink at a certain point, and finally calmed down. At the end of the divine lake, the mountain wall split open, and a young man in a moon-white robe walked out. The young man looked to be in his 30s, and although he was handsome, he wasn't all that outstanding. What really attracted people was his gaze, which contained the sun, moon, and stars, as if it was desolate. This person was moon-worshipping sect's leader, Yi Shaonan, known as the world's #1 great demon after Dugu Weiwei. Although Yi Shaonan's appearance didn't look like the peerless demon in the legends of Jianghu, who had killed countless people and soaked in blood all day long to cultivate, it didn't look like him at all. "Congratulations on coming out of seclusion, sect leader. Our moon-worshipping sect will shine together for thousands of years." Eastern monarch Tai was the first to walk over, and he bowed to congratulate him. The high priest cast a disdainful glance at Eastern monarch Tai and sneered. "You call us Miao barbarians? You Central Plains people really know how to flatter. The high priest's seniority was very high, even higher than Yi Xiaonan's. He didn't act as blatantly as Eastern monarch Tai. He just bowed even lower, and said in a low voice, "Congratulations, sect leader. You have mastered the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra." Yi Xiaonan nodded and said in an indifferent tone, "Thousands of years?" In the past, the Kunlun devil cult was so powerful, but it only dominated Jianghu for 100 years. Wait until our moon-worshipping sect has been around for thousands of years, then maybe we'll have the right to say that. Eastern monarch Tai said in a low voice, "Sect leader, you're too modest." The Kunlun devil cult was too arrogant and overbearing, and that's why they ended up like this. With sect leader here, our moon-worshipping sect will certainly not be like the Kunlun devil cult, a flash in the pan. The holy maiden of moon-worshipping sect giggled and said, "Sect leader, they've said all the good things, so I'll give you a gift. I've waited a long time to get this." With that, the holy maiden waved her hand, and a dazzling white snow lotus wrapped in vital energy flew toward Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan lightly tapped it, and vital energy exploded. The snow lotus petals danced in the air, looking exceptionally magnificent. Yi Xiaonan shook his head and said, "All right, stop messing around. Inform the rest of moon-worshipping sect that I've come out of seclusion. I'm going out." Eastern monarch Tai was stunned and said, "Where are you going?" Yi Xiaonan looked to the west and said indifferently, "Mount Longhu, Celestial Master Mansion." Yi Xiaonan had just mastered the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra and was preparing to go to Celestial Master Mansion at Mount Longhu. Even an idiot knew what he wanted to do. Eastern monarch Tai hesitated for a moment and said, "Isn't it a bit rushed to make a move against the righteous sects now? Moreover, the identity of the young talent nurtured by the Immortal lineage has been exposed. He's actually the current number 1 on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu." Now, several forces in Eastern Qi have joined forces and are attacking the Guanzhong torture room. If sect leader makes a move at this time, it will cause too much of a disturbance. It will definitely attract everyone's attention. That would be equivalent to helping the Immortal lineage out of trouble. Yi Xiaonan looked to the sky and said, "Rushed? 10,000 years is too long. People of my generation can't calculate that far ahead. We can only fight for this day and night. We've been neighbors with the old celestial master for so long, but we still haven't consulted him. It's really a pity. As for the Immortal lineage, there's no need to care about them. Without Dugu Weiwei, they're just a plate of loose sand. They won't amount to anything. Why should our moon-worshipping cult care so much about what we do? It's their luck to inadvertently help them. If we harm them, they'll have to endure it." Yi Xiaonan's voice was very light, but the absolute strength and dominance in her words were even stronger than that of Divine Lord Luo. People like Eastern monarch Tai still had to worry about the Immortal lineage, but in reality, Yi Xiaonan had long since looked down on the Immortal lineage. "I'll do what I want to do. I don't need to worry about others. It doesn't matter to Yi Xiaonan whether I help them or harm them." After saying that, Yi Xiaonan's figure moved and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult raised her eyebrows and whistled, "Sect leader is domineering." Eastern monarch Tai glanced at her and said with a frown, "Image. Pay attention to your image. You're the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult after all. If others see you like this, it won't look good." The Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult just chuckled and didn't care about Eastern monarch Tai. She turned around and left. In the moon-worshipping cult, although the strength of the Holy Virgin was far inferior to Eastern monarch Tai, who was the head of the 9 great divine magus priests, they were equal in status. The Holy Virgin was even higher than the 9 great divine magus priests. In the past, the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult didn't rely on hard cultivation to improve her strength. Now, the Holy Virgin's strength was not as good as Eastern monarch Tai's, but in the future, it might not be the case. Eastern monarch Tai's face darkened. He said to the great priest, "Look at her. Look at her. The great priest sneered and said, "We're all barbarians of the Miao territory. We're used to freedom. Of course, we don't have any rules. You people from the Central Plains have a lot of messy rules." After saying that, the great priest turned around and left. Eastern monarch Tai snorted coldly. He didn't continue to be entangled in such a trivial matter. Instead, he turned around and found someone to announce the news that Yi Xiaonan had come out of seclusion. When Yi Xiaonan was in seclusion, the great priest was temporarily in charge of the moon-worshipping cult. The saint's qualifications and strength were too low to manage the specific matters, and the high priest hid in his hut all day long to study those strange things. Thus, the moon-worshipping cult could only be managed by the Eastern Emperor Tai. Chapter 669. Mount Longhu's scenery was majestic and magnificent. As the leader of the Dao sects, there were many people coming and going from the Celestial Master Mansion. Among them were devotees who came to offer incense, as well as rogue martial artists who came to pay their respects. The Celestial Master Mansion opened its doors to receive these people. Of course, the ones who received them were ordinary Daoist priests from the outer sect. The true disciples of the Celestial Master Mansion were all cultivating in the inner sect. Yi Xiaonan didn't climb the Celestial Master Mansion through the normal mountain path. Instead, he followed the cliffs around the mountain path and climbed up step by step in the air. It was very mystical. Furthermore, Yi Xiaonan wanted to take a look at the scenery of the Celestial Master Mansion. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to fly. At this time, some of the martial artists on the mountain path couldn't help but be shocked when they saw Yi Xiaonan's figure. For these ordinary people and some low-level martial artists, Yi Xiaonan's current behavior was no different from that of an immortal. They didn't know Yi Xiaonan, but some of the martial artists from the Celestial Master Mansion guarding the mountain path weren't short-sighted people. They immediately began to disperse the crowd on Mount Longhu and sent people to inform the old Celestial Master. At this time, Yi Xiaonan didn't care about these disciples of Mount Longhu. To be precise, he didn't pay attention to them at all. For the current Yi Xiaonan, he only cared about two things. One was the beautiful scenery of Mount Longhu, and the other was the old Celestial Master. In terms of legends, the old Celestial Master of the Celestial Master Mansion was a living legend. The old Celestial Master was said to have lived for a very, very long time, so long that he had even seen Dugu Weiwei. So long that he had handed over the position of Celestial Master several times, but the new Celestial Master died even earlier than him. He could only take over the position again and nurture another Celestial Master. In the past, when Dugu Weiwei led the Kunlun Devil cult to dominate the world, the old Celestial Master might have just been a young Taoist priest from the Celestial Master Mansion. However, he had indeed seen Dugu Weiwei. It was even exaggerated to say that the old Celestial Master and Dugu Weiwei were people of the same generation. This wasn't wrong. Of course, the old Celestial Master had never admitted this. In his self-deprecating words, he was indeed from the same generation as Dugu Weiwei, but he was not a human. He was more like an ant. At that time, he was no better than an ant in front of Dugu Weiwei. However, 500 years later, Dugu Weiwei was nowhere to be found. He only became a legend that circulated in Jianghu. On the other hand, the old Celestial Master was still in good health. When he was bored, he would come out to teach his disciples. Zhang Chengzhen had received many pointers from the old Celestial Master. For the past 500 years, the old Heavenly Master had never stood at the pinnacle of the pugilistic world. Far away, there was Dugu Weiwei. Nearby, there was the Elysium's Master, Jun Wushan, and the Carefree Heaven's Master, Zhong Shenxiu. Between them, there were countless talented people. However, for the past 500 years, the old Celestial Master had always been qualified to stand at the pinnacle of the pugilistic world with them. Now that 500 years had passed, talented people appeared in every generation of the pugilistic world. People who were qualified to stand at the pinnacle of the pugilistic world emerged one after another. However, the only one who stood there without moving was the old celestial master. Yi Xiaonan and the old celestial master were neighbors, but he had never had any dealings with the old celestial master. At their level, they would not make a move unless they were absolutely confident. Of course, this was only for Yi Xiaonan. In the old celestial master's opinion, he was already at this age. It was better to leave things like slaying demons to the younger generation. He was only responsible for taking care of the flowers and teaching his disciples. They arrived at the gate of the celestial master's residence. At this time, the originally bustling gate of the celestial master's residence was completely closed. There was not a single person in sight. Yi Xiaonan stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Moon-worshipping cult, Yi Xiaonan, a junior, would like to ask the old celestial master for pointers." Although Yi Xiaonan said he was a junior and wanted to give pointers, his tone did not have any intention of asking for pointers. And the moment his voice fell, the entire celestial master's residence suddenly flashed with a thunderous divine light. It affected the thunderclouds in midair, causing the entire celestial master's residence to be enveloped by the power of thunder. Inside the celestial master's residence, several martial Dao grandmasters were gathered. Among them, a middle-aged Daoist had a solemn expression. He wore a black-gray Daoist robe and had 3 long strands of beard under his chin. He looked extremely dignified. This person was Immortal Yushao Zhang Daoling, who temporarily replaced the old celestial master to take over the celestial master's residence. He was calm, fair, and open-minded. He had a good reputation in the celestial master's residence. But facing Yi Xiaonan at this time, Zhang Daoling still had no confidence. "Senior brother, can the 9 heavens divine firmament lightning manipulation array stop Yi Xiaonan? Let's hurry and find the old celestial master," a martial Dao grandmaster said worriedly. Zhang Daoling glanced at him and said, "We have to stop him even if we can't. If we trouble the old celestial master for everything, what use do we have in the celestial master's residence?" That martial artist was immediately silenced by Zhang Daoling's words. But at this time, Yi Xiaonan suddenly moved. He took a step forward without any defense and actually stepped into the 9 heavens divine firmament lightning manipulation array. In an instant, countless divine firmament lightning bolts blasted toward Yi Xiaonan. But Yi Xiaonan just extended a finger and pointed it lightly. Countless lightning bolts collapsed in midair. The thunderclouds began to completely disintegrate as if they had never appeared. They directly dissipated. Everyone in the celestial master's residence immediately gasped. That was the celestial master mansion's mountain protecting formation, the 9 heavens divine firmament lightning control formation. Even an ordinary true fire cultivator in the soul refinement realm could block it. But in front of Yi Xiaonan, it couldn't even withstand a single finger. This is the power of the Heaven Mending Heart Sutra? Zhang Daoling's eyes revealed a hint of astonishment. Yi Xiaonan was in seclusion to comprehend the Heaven Mending Heart Sutra. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew about this technique. Moon-worshipping cult was the #1 demonic sect, but their technique was called the Heaven Mending Heart Sutra. This name was very similar to the orthodox sects, but in reality, this was an out-and-out orthodox demonic technique. Nothing in this world was perfect, just like the heavenly Tao. The number of the heavenly Tao was 49. The missing one itself represented the incompleteness of the heavenly Tao. Moon-worshipping cult's Heaven Mending Heart Sutra didn't mend the true sky, but the missing heavenly Tao. With the power of man, steal the power of heaven and earth. After mending the sky, I will become a god. Of course, for the rules of the entire world, whether you became a god or not did not have much of an impact on the world. But the power of stealing the sky was to go against the heavens. Those who did not respect the heavenly Tao were demons. With one finger, Yi Shaonan already controlled this part of the world and easily broke the mountain protection array of the Celestial Master's residence. Just as Zhang Daoling and the others were still thinking of countermeasures, an old voice came faintly. "Okay, disperse. It's time for me to make an appearance." The crowd was separated, and an old man walked over. This old man's hair and beard were all white, and his face was full of wrinkles. He even looked somewhat benevolent. Although he was old, his body was straight without the slightest stoop, and there was no sign of death aura on his body. Old Celestial Master. Everyone present immediately stepped back and saluted. Old Celestial Master waved his hand casually and had everyone step aside. He pushed the door open and faced Yi Shaonan. Celestial Master's residence is honored by the presence of moon-worshipping cult master. I am already so old that I can only rely on the title of an old senior to keep up appearances. I'm afraid I can't teach you, Cult Master Yi. Yi Shaonan said expressionlessly, Old Celestial Master is too humble. Over the years, countless people have fought you. Those who lost to you are dead. Those who won against you are also dead. Everyone else thinks that it's because you're able to endure until everyone dies, but they've forgotten that it's actually very difficult for someone to not die after being defeated. Old Celestial Master laughed bitterly. Cult Master Yi, must you fight me? Yi Shaonan nodded expressionlessly. Old Celestial Master sighed. Could his old bones still fight? Even if he could he be stronger than Yi Shaonan who had mastered the Sky-Mending Heart Sutra? Forget it, let's fight. Let's fight in the air at the back of the mountain. That way, we don't have to destroy our temple. Those monks are very shrewd. They are good at scheming. They don't have to worry about incense money, but we do. Hearing this, Yi Shaonan stepped into the air and followed Old Celestial Master to the back of the mountain. Zhang Daoling and the others quickly ran to the back of the mountain to take a look. They found that the entire back of the mountain was shrouded in an extremely powerful aura. Everything was a blur, and they could not see anything at all. Although they couldn't see, they could feel it. The entire back of the mountain was enveloped by the power of thunder. The aura was extremely vast, and the power of thunder seemed to be able to destroy the world. At the same time, the chi of heaven and earth in the back of the mountain began to surge wildly. It was as if the world was being stripped away and was about to be scattered. It was extremely terrifying. In less than 100 breaths' time, everything returned to normal. The blurry aura dissipated, revealing Yi Shaonan and Old Celestial Master's figures. Yi Shaonan's expression didn't change, and Old Celestial Master didn't seem to change either. His face was only slightly pale. Old Celestial Master laughed bitterly and said, I lost. Yi Shaonan said in a low voice, I only lost by 1.5 moves. Old Celestial Master patted his waist and said, we only exchanged 10 moves and lost by 1.5 moves. If we continue, we will lose even more. I'm old and useless. It's time for me to rest. Then, Old Celestial Master said to Zhang Daoling and the others, from today onwards, Dragon Tiger Mountain will be sealed for a year. Everyone, go into seclusion. No one is allowed to take a step out of the Celestial Master Mansion. After Old Celestial Master finished speaking, he looked at Yi Shaonan. He said this to Yi Shaonan. He had lost this battle, so as the price, Celestial Master Mansion would seal off the mountain for a year and ignore the moon-worshipping sect. If Yi Shaonan retreated, it would be fine. However, if he still wanted to push his luck, then even if Old Celestial Master lost by 1.5 moves, he still had the strength to fight back. Yi Shaonan nodded, turned around, and left without saying a word. After Yi Shaonan left, everyone gathered around. However, before they could speak, Old Celestial Master waved his hand. His face became even paler, and his hands were even trembling slightly. Chapter 670. In the righteous martial arts world, the old celestial master was a legend, a living legend. As a result, this legend was defeated by Yi Xiaonan. This matter was enough to set off waves in the martial arts world. And it wasn't over yet. After going to Dragon Tiger Mountain to challenge the old celestial master, Yi Xiaonan even went to the southern wilderness and challenged the abbot of Subhuti Zen Monastery, Monk Rama. He also defeated him, forcing the Subhuti Zen Monastery to stay in the southern wilderness for a year. After 2 battles, the world was shocked. Yi Xiaonan was also ranked 5th on the legendary list, becoming the top demonic cultivator in the martial arts world. After the Battle of Guangzhong City, Chu Xiu indeed won, but the major sects retreated so cleanly, which was also because of Yi Xiaonan. And no one came to trouble Chu Xiu, which was also Yi Xiaonan's credit. Chu Xiu's talent and strength were indeed amazing, and the momentum he made this time was not small, but compared with Yi Xiaonan, it was completely insignificant. This time when Chu Xiu stepped into the realm of Martial Dao Grand Master, he naturally automatically left the Longhu list, but because of his performance in this battle, Wind Sweeping Tower also ranked Chu Xiu in the martial arts ranking list. He was ranked 35th, just behind Zhang Qingjun. In fact, even the current Wind Sweeping Tower couldn't tell who was stronger between Chu Xiu and Zhang Qingjun. Chu Xiu challenged 4 Grand Masters and Shun Bai, who was not weaker than the Grand Master. But although Zhang Qingjun's opponents who stepped into the real pellet state were only 5 who were in the realm of unity of man and nature, each of them was not weaker than the martial Dao Grand Master. Zhang Qingjun's Thunder Golden Elixir had not been condensed for thousands of years, and only Dugu Weiwei had successfully condensed Chu Xiu's Immortal Demon Pill. The two didn't fight, so no one could tell who was stronger or weaker. Therefore, the ranking of the Wind Sweeping Building was only ranked according to the order. Zhang Qingjun stepped into the real pellet state first, so he was ranked ahead of Chu Xiu. Of course, this ranking didn't mean much to Chu Xiu because now all the people in the pugilistic world were focusing on Yi Xiaonan. As for Chu Xiu himself, he was also happy to keep a low profile. After all, for the current Chu Xiu, he had just stepped into the real pellet state of martial Dao. What he needed was time. After the war, the entire Guangzhong torture room was completely loyal. Those who wanted to run had run away, and those who didn't had their status in Guangzhong torture room promoted by 1 level. Chu Xiu handed these things over to Ghost Hand King for the time being. He had just stepped into the real pellet state, so he needed to temporarily retreat to stabilize the restless real pellet state. After everything was arranged, Wei Shuya looked at Chu Xiu and shook his head. Your behavior this time is simply gambling with your life. Only the master has successfully condensed the Immortal Demon Pill. No one can be 100% sure whether it is really immortal or not. Chu Xiu said solemnly, at that time, apart from gambling with my life, I can only wait for death. I don't want to wait for death, so I can only take the risk. Fortunately, God still cares for me. Wei Shuya shook his head. Maybe he was old. He might have done something as dangerous as Chu Xiu when he was young, but now, he wouldn't do it again. At this time, Wei Shuya suddenly thought of something. He wondered, why did Divine Lord Luo escape in the end? Could it be that he saw you perform the red dust ethereal slash and thought that Patriarch Dugu is still alive? Chu Xiu hesitated for a moment, then said, it's possible. After all, Senior Wei, you once said that Patriarch Dugu fought his way to the heavenly gates and almost destroyed the entire heavenly gates by himself. Therefore, it's possible that the people of the heavenly gates are afraid of Senior Dugu. Chu Xiu didn't plan to tell Wei Shuya about his abnormal behavior. It seemed to be related to his deepest secret. Not to mention Wei Shuya, Chu Xiu didn't plan to tell anyone else. Wei Shuya nodded hesitantly. However, it was obvious that he didn't believe Chu Xiu. Patriarch Dugu was indeed famous, but it wasn't so famous that he could scare people away after seeing one of his moves. However, in that battle, only he and Chu Xiu knew what Divine Lord Luo saw. In the eyes of Wei Shuya and others, Chu Xiu just made one move, and Divine Lord Luo was inexplicably scared away. Wei Shuya didn't bother much. He just said to Chu Xiu, "You just stepped into the real pellet state, so you need to cultivate behind closed doors for a while. I won't bother you anymore. By the way, Luo Sansong, Zhao Qingping and others will stay under your command. There is no future for them to follow an old man like me." Luo Sansong, Zhao Qingping and other martial artists of the Yinma clan were not weak. In the past, when they followed Wei Shuya, they could only hide in the dark most of the time. Now that the Yinma clan could regain its foothold in the underworld, at least the people under Chu Xiu could walk openly in Guanzhong. This was already a great improvement. After explaining all this, Chu Xiu went directly into retreat. As he just stepped into the real pellet state, he must let the real pellet of martial arts completely stabilize. If he made a move rashly, although it wouldn't break the real pellet, it was still not good. After a month of retreat, Chu Xiu had already stabilized the restless real pellet in his body. On the path of martial arts, the real pellet state was a threshold. Once you crossed it, it would be another world. Now Chu Xiu finally had such a feeling. When he was in the unity of man and nature state, Chu Xiu's explosive power was equally amazing, but at that time, Chu Xiu only relied on his own strength and powerful martial arts to display this power. But when he reached the real pellet state, with the existence of the real pellet state in his body, Chu Xiu seemed to have some kind of connection with this world. He could control this world with a wave of his hand. Of course, it was still a bit exaggerated to say that he could completely control it, but at least within the scope of Chu Xiu's control, Chu Xiu could use the power of this world. Stretching out his hand, Chu Xiu gently drew a line in front of his eyes, and a sliver of vital energy flowed out. However, it was this sliver of vital energy that attracted the power of the world's vital energy, turning it into a sharp blade qi that slashed at the wall, leaving behind a deep mark. One was to passively borrow the power of this world, and the other was to completely control it. This was also the most straightforward gap between the real pellet state and the unity of man and nature state. Stepping into the real pellet state should have been a joyous event, but Chu Xiu didn't have too much excitement. Instead, his heart was shrouded in a haze. The abnormalities that occurred when he stepped into the real pellet state and the performance of Divine Lord Luo could prove that some strange changes had occurred in him. It was just that Chu Xiu still had no clue about this matter. The only thing he was sure of was that he and Dugu Weiwei seemed to have a strange connection. He seemed to be living in the shadow of the other party. This feeling was very bad. After moving around for a while, Chu Xiu pushed open the door of the retreat room and asked the Ghost Hand King about the movements in the Guanzhong torture room during this time. The Ghost Hand King sneered and said, "Since the last war, the land of Guanzhong has become more prosperous than before, and the number of merchants has even increased by several times. Most of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room are also convinced. Although these guys say that they want to be loyal to the Guanzhong torture room, in fact, for them, as long as there are benefits and the protection of the powerhouse, then everything is fine. Even those who chose to escape before wanted to come back, but I rejected them all. They are just idiots, they are useless." Chu Xiu nodded. What the Ghost Hand King did was right. Before the war began, some people chose to escape, and some people chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room. Regardless of whether the disciples who chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room chose to stay because of their loyalty to Chu Xiu, since they made the right choice, they should be rewarded. If those who made mistakes were allowed to come back, it would be really unfair to the martial artists who chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room. By the way, you just said that there are more merchants going to the land of Guanzhong. What is going on? The Ghost Hand King said, "Isn't it because of Sir's reputation? Those merchants coming and going to the land of Guanzhong don't care if you are righteous or demonic. As long as you can bring them benefits, it is enough." Previously, when Guan Siyu was around, she strictly investigated the smuggling of contraband between the three countries. Although there were some who slipped through the net due to the unwritten rules, they could not do it openly. Now that you are in charge of the Guangzhong torture room, there are naturally not so many rules. You just need to collect some tolls in exchange for such a convenient and fast trade route. Moreover, with your strength, you can cover the Guangzhong torture room. Of course, they will not refuse. Chu Xiu nodded indifferently. At his current realm, he no longer cared about small profits. Almost all the profits from the Guangzhong torture room were distributed to the martial artists under him in the Guangzhong torture room. This was very normal for some large sections. They monopolized some of the profits and business. In fact, the experts in their sects might not need these things, but their disciples still needed them. After giving some instructions to the Ghost Hand King, Chu Xiu went straight to Wei Shuya's room. During this time, Wei Shuya did not leave. He was guarding for Chu Xiu. After all, he couldn't make a move casually when he was in the real pellet state. Otherwise, it would affect his future martial Dao cultivation. Thank you, Senior Wei. Chu Xiu cupped his fist and said in a deep voice. Wei Shuya waved his hand casually and said, "There's nothing to thank me for. You worked hard. I'm just adding flowers to the brocade. By the way, Senior Wei, after this incident, did my Immortal lineage take any action? Is there any change in the underworld?" Chu Xiu asked. Wei Shuya shook his head with a wry smile. This time, it should have been my Immortal lineage to be the protagonist, but the limelight was completely stolen by the moon-worshipping cult. Yi Xiaonan's status as the top demonic cultivator has been established. The moon-worshipping cult dominates West Chu, and they even openly recruit disciples in the Central Plains. Their attitude is extremely aggressive. All the major sects are now wary of the moon-worshipping cult, but they have no time to care about us. Speaking of which, this time Yi Xiaonan helped us a lot and helped us share a lot of pressure. When Wei Shuya said this, he was a little bitter. He didn't know if he should be happy or depressed. Chapter 671. The hidden demon lineage and the bright demon lineage had been fighting for so long. In fact, the entire hidden demon lineage had always thought that they were not much worse than the other party. Even most people in the hidden demon lineage looked down on the bright demon lineage, thinking that they were all cowards, and they were the orthodox of the Kunlun devil cult. As a result, Yi Xiaonan had become the top demonic cultivator, and the moon-worshipping cult also took the attention of the righteous martial arts world for the hidden demon lineage. This made Wei Shuya's mood very complicated. After chatting with Wei Shuya for a while, the Ghost Hand King suddenly knocked on the door and came in. "Sir, someone is looking for you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Who is looking for me? Is it Brother Lu and the others?" During the month when Chu Xiu was in retreat, Lu Fengxian and the others either returned to their respective sects or stayed in the Guangzhong torture room to practice for a while. For example, Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng were like this. They also fought with the martial Dao Grand Master in this battle, and they all had some gains, so they were going to retreat in the Guangzhong torture room for a while before leaving. The Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "No, young Master Lu and the others are still in retreat. They are people from the Northern Yan Imperial Court." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. He remembered that he seemed to have an agreement with the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Of course, Chu Xiu did not intend to go back on this matter. Since Xiang Long helped him at the critical moment, Chu Xiu naturally had to keep his word. Besides, during the Northern Yan Alliance, although Nie Renlong died in the hands of Chu Xiu did not intend to let go of the hatred of others so easily. Moreover, Chu Xiu did plan to go to the Northern Yan. Guangzhong was too small. The resources could support a few martial Dao Grand Masters, but it was difficult for Chu Xiu to go further. Now that Chu Xiu had just stepped into the real pellet state, he didn't need to be so anxious. However, something happened when he attacked Luo Shunjun, which made Chu Xiu suddenly feel a sense of crisis in his heart. This feeling of not being in his control was very uncomfortable, so what Chu Xiu could do was to improve his strength as fast as possible. For this, he would do anything. Wei Shuya, who was at the side, said in a deep voice, "I do not object to your cooperation with Xiang Long. The Jianghu's court may sound simple, but it has never been truly separated. However, Xiang Long is a great ruler of his generation. He is a man of deep thought and is harsh and merciless. If you work with him, you must be careful." Although this person had some problems, he had a lot. He was a master. Yang Long is master, Xiang Long is a master. Yang Long Dragon Xiang. In the past, when Xiang Long united with the Northern Yen pugilistic world to attack the Eastern Qi, it was Yang Gongdu who helped Xiang Long. He lobbied and schemed in the Northern Yen pugilistic world and finally succeeded in this matter. He alone should take at least half of the credit for this matter. As you can see, Yang Gongdu was forced out of the Northern Yen pugilistic world just because he intervened in the battle for the throne. Even Xiang Long had the intention to kill him. It was only because Yang Gongdu still had some trump cards that he survived. This is a lesson from the past. Accompanying the king is like accompanying a tiger. If you touch Xiang Long's reverse scale, with his character, I'm afraid he won't care about the Yinma clan. For most people in the pugilistic world, most of them had no impression of the imperial court. After all, most of the time, they would not and did not want to deal with the imperial court. But the existence of status and strength like Wei Shuya was very clear about the power of the imperial court. Apart from the always weak West Chu, whether it was the Eastern Qi world or the Northern Yen world, the power of the imperial court was not something that a single sect or faction could shake. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Thank you for the advice, Senior Wei." Wei Shuya waved his hand and did not say anything else. In his opinion, Chu Xiu was a smart person. Although sometimes Chu Xiu's actions were a little too radical and risky, this was his way of doing things. Chu Xiu still had a sense of propriety. The recent events had proved all of this. After bidding farewell, Chu Xiu went straight to the meeting hall. At this moment, a middle-aged martial art practitioner dressed in a black official robe was holding a teacup and playing with it, as if he was studying the patterns on it. There was still hot tea in the teacup, but under the cover of his inner strength, no matter how he played with it, not a single drop of tea flowed out. This person was the Marquis of Linping, Xiang Wu, who had been sent by Xiang Long to intercept forefather Huangfu. He was the most talented member of the Xiang royal family. Seeing Chu Xiu come in, Xiang Wu immediately put down his teacup and sized up Chu Xiu without the slightest scruple, as if he was looking at something strange. Chu Xiu did not say anything. He only looked at Xiang Wu and said indifferently, "Marquis, why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" Xiang Wu shook his head and said, "You are much rarer than flowers. To be honest, I really did not expect you to survive this." It seems that His Majesty is far-sighted and did not make a losing deal. After saying this, Xiang Wu's expression suddenly turned solemn. He said, "Chu Xiu, it is time to fulfill the promise you made to His Majesty. His Majesty asked me to remind you in case you forget." Chu Xiu said with a smile that was not a smile, "If I really forget, what does His Majesty plan to do?" Xiang Wu laughed and said, "What do you think His Majesty sent me here for? If you really forget, then His Majesty will let me use my own method to remind you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, I, Chu Xiu, am very particular about keeping my word. I will not forget what I promised. This time, I will bring people with me to Northern Yen with the Marquis. Of course, you must give me some time to make arrangements for the Guanzhong torture room." Xiang Wu waved his hand casually and said, "It is good that you can remember. There is no need to be in such a hurry. His Majesty did not set a date for you. It just so happens that I can stay in the Guanzhong torture room for one night and try the local specialties of Guanzhong." Xiang Wu's hobbies were very strange. When others reached his position and realm, they were greedy for things like power and influence. But Xiang Wu's biggest hobby was eating. And his talent in martial arts was extremely shocking. This also made people feel that the heavens were somewhat unfair. After sending Xiang Wu away, Chu Xiu called the Ghost Hand King and gave him some instructions. In fact, there was nothing much to explain. Now that the Guanzhong torture room had been stabilized, the most important thing was that Wei Shuya was temporarily recovering here. With an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm in charge, Chu Xiu could feel much more at ease. So the next day, Chu Xiu brought people with him to northern Yen with Xiang Wu. This time, Chu Xiu did not bring too many people. He only brought Tang Ye and other elites from the Blue Dragon Society and some of his trusted subordinates from Guanxi. They were all the stronger ones. There were also Luo Sansong, Zhao Qingping, and other warriors from the Yinma clan. Chu Xiu also brought them. These people were stronger, but they were a little unruly. They were not as useful as Tang Ye and the others. And this time, Mei Qinglian also took the initiative to come, which made Chu Xiu feel very strange. Feeling Chu Xiu's strange gaze, Mei Qinglian just said lightly, "After so many years, I have long been tired of staying in the Guanzhong torture room. Now I can find a chance to go out and get some fresh air. It is not a bad idea. Besides, I am helping you. Don't forget that you have a lot of enemies in the northern Yen. Aren't you afraid that someone will secretly plot against you?" Chu Xiu smiled. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "They should be the ones who should be afraid." Before Mei Qinglian said anything, Xiang Wu, who was walking quietly beside them, suddenly came over and said, "You are very confident, but the northern Yen martial arts world is not so easy to deal with. Those who participated in the alliance to kill you were only a part of it." Chu Xiu looked at him and said, "Your Majesty, you are anxious." Xiang Wu was stunned and said, "What did you say?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Compared to me, the one who should be anxious should be your Majesty. The Northern Yen Martial Arts World Alliance wants to kill me, and in just a few days, they have gathered so many people. The Great Light Temple sent someone here and said a word, and it is more effective than your Majesty. If I were your Majesty, I would also be anxious. Otherwise, with your Majesty's character, you would not have specially sent you to find me. It is clear that for your Majesty, any power is very important." Xiang Wu was stunned, then laughed and said, "Sometimes it is not good to be too clear. It is fine for you to say this in front of me. I do not like to snitch, but if you say it in front of your Majesty, you will be in trouble." As he said this, Xiang Wu stuffed a banana to Chu Xiu and said, "Eat more bananas and talk less." After saying this, Xiang Wu directly rode to the other side, no longer talking to Chu Xiu. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "Marquis Linping Xiang Wu is very famous in the Northern Yen court. Who is this guy? Which side is he on?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "He does not stand on either side. He only stands on his own side. This is what a smart person should be like. Although he looks preposterous and muddle-headed, he understands better than anyone else. Regardless of whether it is in the imperial court or in the pugilistic world, Xiang Wu will be able to do well." Mei Qinglian looked slightly surprised at Chu Xiu. She knew that Chu Xiu was a bit arrogant. It was not easy for Xiang Wu to be evaluated by Chu Xiu like this. After arriving at the capital of the Northern Yen, this time, Chu Xiu did not enter through the small door. Instead, he was led by Xiang Wu through the main door. Only Mei Qinglian was qualified to enter with Chu Xiu. The others were arranged outside. It was still in the side hall where Chu Xiu had met Xiang Long previously. However, this time, other than Xiang Long, there was an old man dressed in an evil Daoist robe standing by his side as well. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian only cupped their hands for show. Xiang Long waved his hand and said, "Chu Xiu, you are finally here. You did not disappoint me this time. You survived this time, which means that my previous choice was not wrong. I helped you in the past, and now it is time for you to help me. I will not waste any more words. This is the Imperial Preceptor of the Northern Yen and my trusted confidant, the sect master of the Yinshan sect, Daoist Wuwang. I intend to leave the matter of the Northern Yen martial world to the two of you. Chu Xiu did not say anything, but when Mei Qinglian, who was standing behind him, heard the words Shadow Mountain Sect, her gaze towards Daoist Wuwang was filled with a hint of surprise. Chapter 672. Xianglong was very direct. It seemed that he had reached the limit of his tolerance for some of the Northern Yen martial world's actions. Chu Xiu glanced at Daoist Wuwang. He didn't feel anything wrong. Xianglong couldn't trust Chu Xiu completely on such a big matter. The Northern Yen court would definitely find someone to keep him in check. Since Daoist Wuwang was Xianglong's confidant, it was normal for him to be in charge of these things. Therefore, Chu Xiu just said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, rest assured. Since I made a promise in the past, I will definitely fulfill it. However, I still want to ask Your Majesty, since Your Majesty is going to let me suppress the martial arts of Northern Yen Kingdom, I wonder what kind of identity and power Your Majesty can give me? Otherwise, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice." Xianglong said in a low voice, "I have already thought about this. I plan to set up a new department in the Northern Yen, called the Martial Suppression Hall. You, Chu Xiu, will be the governor, in charge of external expeditions. Daoist Wuwang will be the chief supervisor, in charge of internal trials and recruiting rogue cultivators who are willing to work for the Northern Yen. In terms of rank, one will deal with internal affairs, while the other will deal with external affairs. Your authority is different, but your rank is the same. You are on the same level as the generals of the 5 armies. As for other aspects, I will not give you anything in terms of direct power. If I had more power, I wouldn't need to look for you. I could just send an army to suppress them. So I can only promise you that the Northern Yen court will do its best to cooperate with your actions in the Northern Yen martial world. However, if you make a big deal out of it, you will have to bear the consequences. But don't worry, I am not a petty person. After successfully suppressing the Northern Yen martial world, your Yinshan sect will become the national religion of the Northern Yen. It can be worshipped for generations. Chu Xiu, your Yinma clan can also establish their own sect in the Northern Yen land. No one will be blind enough to come and kill them. The generals of the Northern Yen 5 armies were basically at the same level as Xiangwu. In terms of status, they were not low. Of course, status was just status, and power was power. Not only did Xiangwu command the 5 armies of the kingdom, but he also had a lot of say in the Northern Yen imperial court. As for Chu Xiu and Daoist Wuwang, they were both from the Jianghu. No matter how much Xianglong trusted them, they were still outsiders. Therefore, other than their own subordinates, the other subordinates of the Northern Yen dynasty would not listen to their orders. As for Xianglong's promise, Chu Xiu did not take it to heart. Wei Shuya had once commented on Xianglong. This great ruler of the 3 kingdoms was actually a harsh and merciless person. His words should be taken with a grain of salt and not taken seriously. Daoist Wuwang bowed towards Xianglong and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Chu Xiu also cupped his hands and said, "Rest assured, Your Majesty. The promise I made to Your Majesty in the past will not change." Xianglong waved his hand and said, "Since this is the case, I will leave this matter to you. The matters of the Jianghu will naturally be settled by the people of the Jianghu. I will not ask too much. Remember, I only want results. I have already built the headquarters of the Zhenwu Hall. It is in Yanjing City. You can open the headquarters at any time. As for the specifics, you can discuss it among yourselves. Both of you are smart people. I believe you should know how to cooperate." After he finished speaking, Xiang Long left the side hall with the help of an old eunuch. Daoist Wuyang walked over and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. A strange smile appeared on his face and he said, "From now on, I will be working with official Chu. I hope that official Chu will give me some pointers." Chu Xiu said lightly, "That's easy. I wonder if Daoist Wuyang has any suggestions for the opening of the headquarters?" Daoist Wuyang said, "Official Chu has just arrived in the capital. Why don't you settle down for a night? Such an important matter naturally needs to be explained in detail. Tomorrow, we will go to the Jianghu Hall to discuss in detail. What do you think, official Chu?" "All right." Chu Xiu nodded. After Daoist Wuyang left, Chu Xiu also left the palace with Mei Qinglian. "You know that Daoist Wuyang?" After leaving the range of the palace, Chu Xiu suddenly asked. He could feel that Mei Qinglian's emotions seemed to be a little off after hearing the words Daoist Wuyang. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I don't know this guy, but I have heard of the Shadow Mountain sect. They were once part of my Inma sect. To be precise, they were part of my sacred cult in the past." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "They are also part of the orthodox Kunlun devil cult?" Mei Qinglian said, "They can't be considered orthodox. The Shadow Mountain sect has its own inheritance. Actually, at the beginning, the Shadow Mountain sect belonged to the Dao sect. However, they were good at all kinds of evil spells and ghost refining techniques. The Dao sect advocated nature, while the Shadow Mountain sect's philosophy was that life and death were the main path. Therefore, the disciples of the Shadow Mountain sect either studied how to live long or studied the dead, which was why they were rejected by the Dao sect. At that time, the power of the Holy Church was at its peak, and it dominated the Jianghu. Since the Shadow Mountain sect was rejected by the orthodox martial world and the Dao sect, it naturally joined the Holy Church. However, the Shadow Mountain sect seemed to have done something that made Patriarch Dugu very angry, so they were expelled from the sacred cult. However, the Shadow Mountain sect's leader was quite capable. He was actually able to take a blow from Patriarch Dugu and not die. Otherwise, the Shadow Mountain sect would not have been expelled, but directly annihilated. The Shadow Mountain sect offended both the orthodox and demonic sects, and from then on, disappeared from the martial world. You know what happened after that. The Shadow Mountain sect did not appear in the war between the orthodox and demonic sections. They did not appear for hundreds of years, so I thought that they were completely extinct. I didn't expect that they still had a successor. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, "If that's the case, doesn't that mean that they are our enemies?" Mei Qinglian spread her hands and said, "It's a grudge from hundreds of years ago. Now, there aren't many people in the Inma clan who remember the Shadow Mountain sect. We can't even be considered enemies. Let's see how the people of the Shadow Mountain sect see us." However, the Shadow Mountain sect's actions are treacherous. It's never wrong to be careful. Chu Xiu nodded and remembered this matter. However, he was not too worried about the Shadow Mountain sect and this Daoist Wuyang. To be a little arrogant, he, Chu Xiu, had even blocked the attacks of many orthodox sects, not to mention an evil sect that did not dare to appear for hundreds of years. The next morning, Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and the others came to Yanjing City. Xiang Long specially built the Jianghu Hall for them. Chu Xiu had been to the two new and old capital cities of Eastern Qi, Great Liang City and Nanliang City. They were both very majestic. Although Chu Xiu had been to Yanjing City before, he did not take a good look. The last time he came to Yanjing City, Chu Xiu was to ask for help from the northern Yan court. What he lacked the most was time. It was a race against time. How could he have the time to go sightseeing? This time, Chu Xiu had the time to look around. However, he was slightly disappointed. Northern Yan's background was not as good as Eastern Qi. Yanjing City was built in a square shape and very orderly. However, whether it was the area or the atmosphere in the city, it was not as grand as Eastern Qi's Great Liang City. It was also not as prosperous as Nanliang City. Tangya, who was standing behind Chu Xiu, smiled and said, "Sir, are you disappointed in Yanjing City? When you go to West Chu's capital, Jianghu City, I think you will be even more disappointed. That place is not as prosperous as an ordinary big city in eastern Qi." Chu Xiu asked, "Have you stayed in West Chu for a long time?" Tangya's eyes had a trace of reminiscence. He nodded and said, "Not too much. However, I am from Sichuan. I have been to Jianghu City quite a bit. However, that was a long time ago." Everyone chatted along the way and arrived at the Jianghu Hall. It seemed that Xiang Long had endured the Northern Yan's martial arts forces for a long time. The name Jianghu Hall was enough to explain everything. Jianghu Hall suppressed the Northern Yan martial arts world. The entire Jianghu Hall was also extremely grand. It was built with black walls and red tiles, giving people a gloomy and ferocious feeling. The stone lions placed at the entrance of the Jianghu Hall were not ordinary stone lions. Instead, they were two black tigers carved with incomparable intelligence. They looked abnormally ferocious. Walking into the Jianghu Hall, Daoist Wuyang was already waiting there. Daoist Wuyang's subordinates were all pale and gloomy Daoist priests. It was unknown whether it was because of their cultivation methods, but this group of people seemed to have not seen the sun for a long time. The death aura on their bodies was very strong. When Daoist Wuyang saw Chu Xiu coming, the corner of his mouth twitched. He revealed a strange smile and said, "Official Chu is here? Then let's discuss the opening time of the Jianghu Hall." Chu Xiu sat opposite Daoist Wuyang. He waved his hand and said, "Of course, the sooner the better. But before the opening, send invitations to all the Northern Yan martial arts sects and invite them to come and watch the ceremony." Daoist Wuyang frowned and said, "Why invite them? Do you want us to tell them that the Jianghu Hall was established to deal with you?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Of course it is to establish our prestige. Whether they come or not is their business. Whether we invite them or not is our business." Daoist Wuyang said in a hoarse voice, "Official Chu, His Majesty asked us to establish the Jianghu Hall in preparation to suppress the Northern Yan martial arts world. It is not for you to show off your power. If things go wrong, who will be responsible?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Show off my power? Daoist, are you questioning my ability? From the Immortal lineage to the entire Guanzhong torture room, when have I, Chu Xiu, done anything wrong? On the contrary, Daoist, do you have any achievements in the martial arts world?" Chu Xiu's battle achievements were displayed on the excellence list. Countless people had died at Chu Xiu's hands through plots and schemes, open and covert struggles. He was indeed qualified to say such words. On the contrary, although Daoist Wuyang had the title of national master, and his strength should not be considered weak in the real pellet state, he was really not as famous as Chu Xiu. At this moment, a middle-aged Daoist behind Daoist Wuyang said sarcastically, "Everyone knows how to boast. If things go wrong, our Mountain sect will also have to bear the responsibility." As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu's eyes showed a touch of coldness, and his fingers slammed on the table. Right at this moment, Tangya, who was standing behind Chu Xiu, suddenly made his move. A transparent and slender flying dagger had left his hand at some point, and in almost an instant, it had already arrived in front of the middle-aged Daoist. Chapter 673. Among the warriors under Chu Xiu was most optimistic about two people. One was Tangya, and the other was Yen Bugui. Although they weren't the strongest, they had the greatest potential. At this time, Tangya was still in the half-step unity of heaven and man realm, but the middle-aged Daoist who spoke previously had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, when Tangya's saber was almost in front of him, he suddenly reacted. His body twisted like a snake, and the grey deathly aura condensed into the shape of an evil spirit in front of him. However, it was instantly torn apart by the sharp aura of the saber. Relying on the deathly aura, the middle-aged Daoist managed to block the attack for a short moment. The middle-aged Daoist's body was almost twisted into the shape of a fried dough twist. Only then did he barely manage to dodge Tang Ye's attack. However, when he touched his face, he realized that his face had been torn by the sharp blade aura, and there was a bloody scar. Chu Xiu looked at Tang Ye in surprise. He did not expect that Tang Ye had actually reached this step. Tang Ye seemed to know a lot of things, such as qinggong, close combat, sword techniques, saber techniques, etc., but he was most proficient in concealed weapons. In the past, Tang Ye had asked Chu Xiu for some advice on concealed weapons, and he also wanted to learn Li Feilian's way of cause and effect. At that time, Chu Xiu only gave Tang Ye some advice, telling him that the way of cause and effect was not taught, and also his future direction of martial arts. However, Chu Xiu did not expect Tang Ye to improve so quickly. In just a few months, Tang Ye had turned the simple into the complicated, and turned the dense and complicated concealed weapons into this saber with extreme speed and power. Daoist Wuyang slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Chu Xiu! What is the meaning of this? Does the Jianghu Hall still have any rules?" Chu Xiu knocked the table and said coldly, "If the Jianghu Hall has rules, why did your disciple interrupt just now? Does he have the right to interrupt when you and I are talking?" Previously in the royal palace, both Daoist Wuyang and Chu Xiu were restraining themselves. Both sides could still pretend to be polite. Now that the conflict had erupted, neither side would give the other any face. Chu Xiu said coldly, "Daoist Wuyang, I know who you are. If your Yin Mountain sect wants to find trouble with my hidden devil sect, then fine, I'll take it. If you only want to obtain the status of the orthodoxy, then I advise you to obediently cooperate with me. If the Jianghu Hall develops well, it will be beneficial for both of us. If it doesn't, I'll just go back to Guangzhou and mess around. As for your Shade Mountain sect, you won't even have a place to stand. The state religion of Eastern Qi is the Jianghu sect. You should know what kind of impression the Yin Mountain sect has in the eyes of the orthodox Taoist warriors. As for West Chu's moon-worshipping religion, you can try and see if moon-worshipping religion can accept you. His Majesty has already said, you and I, one inside and one outside. You do your thing, I do mine, and we won't interfere with each other. If you insist on interfering with my affairs, I'd like to see who will be the unlucky one in the end." Chu Xiu could roughly guess why the Yin Mountain sect had turned to the Northern Yan imperial court. It was nothing more than a place to stand. The Hidden Devil sect did not need such a place. Chu Xiu already had the Guangzhou torture room, so he did not need it either. If they really fell out, he would like to see who would lose more. Daoist Wuyang looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of coldness, but then he snorted coldly and said, "Fine. We'll do as you say. You deal with the outside and I'll deal with the inside. If your people cross the line, then don't blame me for being impolite." After saying that, Daoist Wuyang turned around and left. He did not argue with Chu Xiu about the opening date. After walking out of the main hall, the middle-aged Daoist who was almost severely injured by Tang Ye's blade just now said indignantly, "Master, that Chu Xiu is too arrogant and egotistical in the way he does things. We have been laying out our plans in Northern Yan for such a long time, but the moment he comes, he puts on an attitude of wanting to be the master of the house." Why? Before he could finish, Daoist Wuyang had already slapped him across the face. "Who allowed you to speak without permission just now?" Daoist Wuyang looked coldly at the disciple. The middle-aged Taoist covered his face and explained, "Master, I saw that Chu Xiu, Pa." Another slap came. "Let me ask you, who allowed you to speak just now?" This time, the middle-aged man did not dare to speak anymore. He only covered his face and lowered his head. Daoist Wuyang said coldly, "How many times have I warned you? Since you've joined the imperial court, then you have to do things according to the rules of the imperial court. I originally wanted to deal with Chu Xiu, but with your interruption, both sides shed all pretenses of cordiality. What's there to talk about then? When will you all stop being so rash? The middle-aged Taoist covered his face and gritted his teeth. Master, I know I was wrong. But this time, His Majesty is too unfair. My Shadow Mountain sect has sought refuge with His Majesty for many years. How many things have we done for His Majesty? In the end, although His Majesty has agreed to establish the Jianghu Hall and confer Shadow Mountain sect as the national religion, he still brought Chu Xiu here. This clearly shows that he doesn't trust us. Daoist Wuyang said coldly, trust? If His Majesty could trust me so easily, he wouldn't be a hero of Northern Yen. The Jianghu Hall is such an important position. If he only let me manage it, even if my Shadow Mountain sect has no other intentions, there will still be problems. Chu Xiu has appeared at the right time. Even if there isn't Chu Xiu, there will be others. Chu Xiu thought that Xiang Long had sent Daoist Wuyang to keep him in check. Now, Daoist Wuyang thought that Xiang Long had done this to keep him in check. Xiang Long's political tactics were incomparably experienced. At the very least, whether it was Chu Xiu or Daoist Wuyang, they could not truly cooperate intimately. Mei Qinglian sat beside Chu Xiu and raised her eyebrows, saying, "These fellows from the Shadow Mountain sect have changed their minds and left so quickly?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "What else can they do if they don't leave? Falling out before the Jianghu Hall has even been opened won't look good for either side. The only difference is that they will suffer more. The Shadow Mountain sect has disappeared for so many years. One can imagine that their days have not been easy. It wasn't easy for them to find a place like the Northern Yen. They won't give it up so easily. Let's not care about them for now. Like I said, we will do our own things and they will do theirs. We won't interfere with each other. If anyone crosses the line, we will chop off the hand that reaches out." Without Daoist Wuyang's interference, Chu Xiu directly set the date for the Jianghu Hall's opening to be 3 days later. At the same time, he sent out invitations to the entire Northern Yen martial world to attend the ceremony. As soon as the invitations were sent out, the entire Northern Yen martial world was in an uproar. Chu Xiu had actually returned. In the past, in the Northern Yen alliance, the only true loss was the memorial village. At that time, Chu Xiu only came to destroy the Northern Yen alliance. He didn't have the strength to slaughter the entire Northern Yen alliance. Therefore, the forces that participated in the alliance at that time were not worried about what would happen to Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu survived this disaster, he would definitely choose to keep a low profile and stabilize his current strength. In the end, who would have thought that Xiang Long would recruit Chu Xiu as the governor of the Jianghu Hall? Just listen to the name, the Jianghu Hall. Who was this aimed at? In a mountain village at the junction of the Northern Yen Alliance and the eastern and western regions, this was where the headquarters of the giant spirit gang was located. Fang Datong gripped the invitation that Chu Xiu had sent over with a frown. Below him were some martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. They were all the higher-ups of the giant spirit gang. At this time, an old man said bitterly, "What did I say? Our giant spirit gang should not have been involved in those messy things." Now, Chu Xiu actually returned to the Northern Yen Alliance and even cooperated with the Northern Yen Imperial Court. If Chu Xiu comes to deal with our giant spirit gang, what can we do? Now that the invitation has been sent, should we go or not? Fang Datong glanced at him coldly and said, "Feng Tianyi, are you blaming me? Am I not thinking about the giant spirit gang?" Feng Tianyi's strength was not weak. He had reached the half-step unity of Heaven and Man realm. He was the great elder of the giant spirit gang. His seniority was even higher than Fang Datong. Therefore, he often raised objections to some matters of the giant spirit gang. Relying on his seniority, his words were somewhat disrespectful to Fang Datong as the gang leader. Feng Tianyi snorted coldly and said, I did not say that, but you are the gang leader. The future of tens of thousands of members of the giant spirit gang is in your hands. It does not matter if you make a wrong decision, but it will cause the destruction of the century-old foundation of the giant spirit gang. Seeing that the tension between the two sides was getting thicker and thicker, a middle-aged martial artist in brocade clothes with a square face immediately stood up to smooth things over and said, "The gang leader is also thinking about the giant spirit gang." Who knew that the emperor would cooperate with Chu Xiu? He knew that he was a member of the Yinma clan, but he still let him take charge of the Jianghu hall. Xiang Long's doing this is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. I think he is old and confused. A wise ruler is about to become a fatuous ruler. And look at the name he came up with, Jianghu. Doesn't it mean to suppress our northern Yan Wulin? Even if there is no Chu Xiu, there will probably be someone else in charge of the Jianghu hall. This middle-aged man was called Shen Feiying, the deputy gang leader of the giant spirit gang. He was also Feng Datong's sworn brother and his #1 confidant. The main reason why Feng Tianyi was dissatisfied with Feng Datong was that he appointed people by favoritism. He was the great elder and had a high seniority. He did not have any thoughts about the position of deputy gang leader, but he was dissatisfied with Feng Datong promoting his sworn brother to the position of deputy gang leader as soon as he came to power. Feng Tianyi said with a cold face, well, what you said is reasonable. Then, the opening of the Jianghu hall, should we go or not? Feng Datong snorted coldly and said, go for what? Don't you understand what Chu Xiu means? He is here to establish his prestige. To tell the whole northern Yan Wulin that he, Chu Xiu, is back. Don't worry, the Jianghu hall is against the whole northern Yan Wulin. Once this Chu Xiu dares to make a big move, the other righteous sects of northern Yan will not sit idly by. Don't worry about him. The Jianghu and the imperial court had always been the opposite of each other. People in the Jianghu had to consider the reactions of many parties when they killed each other, let alone the imperial court. If the imperial court did such an outrageous thing without warning, it would definitely cause the hostility of the whole Jianghu, and the matter would be completely blown up. Chapter 674. The establishment of the Jianghu hall not only made the giant spirit gang nervous. In fact, all the sects who received the news were the same. Of course, some big sects still had some confidence. For example, for old peak powers like the Drifts Now City and the Huangfu clan, their clans would have some old ancestors who were in seclusion. When they truly faced a crisis, their trump cards would definitely be more terrifying than what the outsiders saw. And when the Great Light Temple received the invitation, they didn't send it to the abbot at all. They threw it away directly. For the current Great Light Temple, they had the entire underworld in their sights. They were not in the mood to continue messing around with Chu Xiu and the others in the northern Yan. As long as Chu Xiu didn't provoke the Great Light Temple, the Great Light Temple couldn't be bothered with Chu Xiu. Therefore, the entire northern Yan martial arts world chose to deal with it in silence under this strange atmosphere. 3 days later, the Jianghu hall was officially opened, but it was deserted. Not to mention the sects in the underworld, even Daoist Wuyang didn't come. He had fallen out with Chu Xiu. From now on, he was only responsible for internal affairs. He didn't intend to intervene in the things that Chu Xiu was responsible for. At least for the time being, he wouldn't have any violent conflicts with Chu Xiu. Of course, he wouldn't come to support Chu Xiu. At this moment, Xiang Wu walked into the lobby of the Jianghu hall with a fruit basket in his hand. It was full of bananas. Xiang Wu handed the banana basket to Tangya, who came over. He looked around and said, "This is a congratulatory gift for the opening of the hall. It is a great tonic to strengthen your sex drive. Speaking of which, your Jianghu hall has a bad start. The opening of the hall is so deserted that there isn't even a single supporter. Your Majesty, why don't you use the power of the Northern Yan court to announce it to the world? Chu Xiu's expression was a little weird. A basket of bananas is the gift? Bananas can strengthen sex drive? Where did Jianghu come up with this conclusion? Actually, it wasn't that Jianghu was stingy. This thing only grew in the southern barbarians and a small part of West Chu. It wasn't easy to eat fresh bananas in the northern Yan, and this thing was quite expensive. Chu Xiu asked someone to serve a cup of tea to Jianghu. He said, "Today the front door is deserted, but perhaps the next day it will be crowded like a marketplace? Thank you, Marquis, for coming to support us." What other advice does Marquis have? Jianghu and Chu Xiu didn't have much of a friendship. Although the two of them had chatted, they could only be regarded as acquaintances nodding their heads. At most, they just didn't have any ill feelings towards each other. In the end, Jianghu came to support him personally and gave him a basket of precious bananas. He probably didn't just want to befriend Chu Xiu. Jianghu laughed and said, "I can't say that I want to teach you. I just want you to do me a small favor." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "What small favor?" Jianghu said, "That old brat Fang Datong from the Giant Spirit Gang participated in the Demon Killing Alliance's attack on you last time. To be honest, that old brat's strength isn't that great. He looks like a big man, but he's good at doing business. The trade route from northern Yan to eastern Qi has been well managed by him. The Giant Spirit Gang is very rich. Just the inner sect members are in the tens of thousands, spanning across northern Yan and eastern Qi. If you make a move against the Giant Spirit Gang, you can take the gang's income. Help me keep the trade route, don't destroy it." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Marquis is short on money? But with the Giant Spirit Gang's strength, they can't stop Marquis. If you want to destroy the Giant Spirit Gang and take their trade route, it's very simple. At Jianghu's level, ordinary money should be nothing to him. Some precious cultivation resources are the most important." Jianghu sighed helplessly and said, "Of course I'm short on money. As one of the 5 armies of the state, the West Hill Army's daily expenses are enough. But you also have a lot of subordinates. You should know that if you want your subordinates to be convinced, you must at least come up with something real. You want your subordinates to risk their lives for you just to feed them. How can it be so simple? As a general, I need a lot of money. Do you think I don't need to spend money to eat bananas? Do you think I don't need to spend money to reward my subordinates? If my subordinates die in battle, apart from the compensation given by the court, don't I, as a general, need to express my gratitude?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Jianghu was indeed not so simple. He looked mischievous, but in fact, his ability was not weak. According to Chu Xiu's knowledge, the West Hill Army should be the weakest among the 5 armies of the state. But since Jianghu became a general, it only took a few years for the West Hill Army to develop to the point where it was not inferior to the other 4 armies. This was already not easy. Jianghu suddenly said in a low voice, "As for why I don't do it myself, you should be able to guess that the place where the Giant Spirit Gang is located is not under my jurisdiction. Also, as the Northern Yan general, if I destroy the Giant Spirit Gang for my own selfish desires, the monks of the Great Light Temple might come and cause trouble. Although I'm not afraid of them, I don't want to be punished by His Majesty." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. The Northern Yan court was not a monolithic block, at least it was the case between the 5 armies of the state. Otherwise, Jianghu wouldn't have come looking for him. He would have just told the general in charge of the Giant Spirit Gang's territory. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, "Marquis, do you believe that the Jianghu Hall can stand firm in the northern Yan?" Jianghu stood up and said with a smile, "To be honest, I don't believe you. It's just a bet. If I win, you will be my friend. In the future, if you need me in the northern Yan court, just look for me. If I lose, I will only lose a basket of bananas." After saying this, Jianghu turned and left. Mei Qinglian squinted her eyes and said, "Jianghu is a very interesting guy. Chu Xiu nodded and said, very interesting. He is open and aboveboard. Xiang Wu's words were very direct. He was investing in advance. If Chu Xiu could stand firm and help him get the trade route of the giant spirit gang, he would return the favor and help Chu Xiu. On the other hand, there was no need to say more. Tangya carried a basket of bananas and said, "My lord, what about these bananas?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Divide them. After eating, it's time to work." As he said this, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a touch of coldness. Tangya nodded and was about to take the bananas out when Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, "Give me one." Tangya looked at Mei Qinglian strangely. Didn't Xiang Wu say that this thing was used to strengthen one's sex drive? Women also need to strengthen their sex drive? At the border of eastern Yan, in Qi River Commandery, Chu Xiu only brought Mei Qinglian, Tangya and a dozen other people to hide here. Actually, Chu Xiu didn't intend to make a move on the giant spirit gang so quickly. After all, the other party was one of the 6 major gangs. Their identity was a bit special. Chu Xiu was prepared to deal with them one by one. But because of Xiang Wu's visit and the fact that Fang Datong attacked him on the demon-killing alliance, Chu Xiu also gave him a chance, but he didn't cherish it. As a result, it was fine to put him as the main target. However, Mei Qinglian was puzzled when she saw that Chu Xiu had only brought a dozen or so people with him. It's just the giant spirit gang. Go straight to their door and kill Fang Datong. The rest are just a bunch of useless people. Why are you still hiding here? In the inn, Mei Qinglian asked Chu Xiu in confusion. Chu Xiu poured himself a cup of tea and said, "Killing Fang Datong is easy. Destroying the giant spirit gang is also easy. But what next? Destroy the divine martial sect? The divine martial sect can be destroyed, but what about again? Provoke old ancestor Huangfu and the old ancestor of the floating snow city in the extreme north, and then become the enemy of the entire northern Yan martial world. Then, provoke the Great Light Temple, and finally make things big enough for Xianglong to push us out to be the scapegoats?" Mei Qinglian rubbed her head. She wasn't good at these big-picture things. Otherwise, she wouldn't be the holy lady of the Yin demon sect, but the sect leader. Then what do you plan to do? Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Fighting and killing isn't a good way to solve the problem. Killing Fang Datong and controlling the giant spirit gang don't actually conflict." Just as Mei Qinglian was about to ask more, Tangya suddenly walked in and placed a pile of information in front of Chu Xiu. "Lord, the information about the upper echelons of the giant spirit gang is all here." During the time that Chu Xiu and the others had been hiding in Qi River Commandery, they had actually been collecting information about the giant spirit gang. The giant spirit gang dominated Qi River Commandery, and more than half of the gang members were there. With so many people, it wasn't too difficult to find out these things. Mei Qinglian suddenly said, "You want to drive a wedge between the upper echelons of the giant spirit gang and make them kill each other?" Chu Xiu put down the information in his hand and threw it to Mei Qinglian. "The giant spirit gang doesn't need us to drive a wedge between them. What I want to do is just to help someone." Mei Qinglian flipped through the information and said after a while, "Is it the Grand Elder of the giant spirit gang, Feng Tianyi? This person can be used. He has a lot of seniority in the giant spirit gang, and he often contradicts Fang Datong. We can use him." Chu Xiu smiled. "I'm not talking about Feng Tianyi, but him. Fang Datong's sworn brother, Shen Feiying." Mei Qinglian frowned. "Why would you choose him?" "Shen Feiying is Fang Datong's sworn brother. When Fang Datong first became the gang leader, he promoted Shen Feiying, who was just a Joss master, to a branch leader. In the end, he made him the deputy leader and trusted him. Moreover, Shen Feiying was even more grateful. As long as it was Fang Datong's order, he would carry it out unconditionally. He could be said to be Fang Datong's right-hand man. How can you drive a wedge between such a person? I'm afraid that in the end, you still have to use force. Chu Xiu shook his head. You're wrong about this. Sometimes, a brother who seems to be willing to sacrifice himself for you, actually wants to stab you in his heart. You may know a person's face, but you don't know their heart. Everyone has a devil in their heart. Holy lady, your beauty technique can see through people's hearts, but in fact, you're just forcefully changing people's hearts. The real heart is more complicated than you think. Mei Qinglian nodded thoughtfully, but then she suddenly realized that she was older than Chu Xiu. Why did Chu Xiu look like he could see through the world? You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.